Chapter 1581. Ever since the Nye family's crisis had subsided, John Jiangpass had calmed down. Jiang Pengji became a hands-off shopkeeper after being busy for a while. She claimed that she was training the new generation. Therefore, she threw a lot of trivial chores to the two little kids, Feng Yi and Sun Lan. Seeing this, Sun Wen was especially distressed. He kept saying, Lan Lan has lost weight again, her clothes seem to be a size bigger. Good grandson, this is the chicken soup Grandpa asked someone to make. Jiang Pengji looked at him coldly until her teeth hurt. However, Sun Wen was right in front of her, so she couldn't say it out loud. Salted fish in the streaming room didn't have to worry about that. He quickly uploaded a post titled, Self-Cultivation for Sun Complex, to the top of the trending list. Almost everything Jiang Pengji wanted to complain about had been said by them. Fairy Queen's Crimson. Old Sun Wen is a textbook example of a grandson complex. He can't wait to take his grandson away with him. Jumping Little Apple's Xianggu. Sigh, other people's grandfathers never disappoint me. I envy, and hate them. He Tang Yi say, old son can take his grandson to the variety show. Where are we going, grandfather? He'll definitely be the most popular. Although he doted on his grandson, Sun Wen had a sense of propriety. He wouldn't interfere with his grandson's training. He watched Sun Lan struggle. In comparison, Feng Yi was much more pitiful. He bowed his head at the table every time and visibly became thinner. Qiguan Rang couldn't stand it anymore. Occasionally, he would stand up and help to prevent the child from ascending at such a young age. Thank you very much. After nearly a year, the last bit of childishness on Feng Yi's face had disappeared. His brows were filled with determination that didn't match his age. His height had grown like a bean sprout. He was now only half a head shorter than Qiguan Rang. One had to know that Qiguan Rang was of mixed blood. His frame was much taller than the average Central Plains man. Feng Yi was still young. There was still room for him to grow taller. He would become taller in the future. Your father said all kinds of nice things and gave me gifts to take care of you. If I don't do something, won't he make a fuss if he finds out? Qiguan Rang had no intention of covering up for Feng Zhen. After all, Feng Yi knew what kind of person his father was. His words were laced with sarcasm and harshness. However, in front of Feng Yi, Qiguan Rang was much gentler. He would even instruct the guards to hunt some wild game for him in the mountains to nourish him. He had the demeanor of a loving father. He said, eat more. I've been growing recently. The food in the military camp is still too plain. Feng Yi agreed with a smile. Her gaze landed on the pile of unfinished military affairs on the table, and her head started to hurt. Has my lord's health improved recently? My lord's body is stronger than a bear's. What discomfort? That's just an excuse to be lazy. Qiguan Rang knew what he was trying to test and said, that's just her personality. She can't stand the tedious paperwork. It's not a big deal, so I threw it to you and Sun Lan to practice. Feng Yi asked, does the Lord often do this? Previously, when the war was intense, Feng Yi often saw that Jiang Pengji's camp was brightly lit. No matter how many military affairs he brought in, they would always be cleaned up the next day. Therefore, Jiang Pengji left an impression on Feng Yi that she was diligent in government affairs until recently. Wrongly, she's the Lord. If she had to do everything herself, why would she need so many officials? Qiguan Rang said naturally, after you graduate from the Golden Scale Academy and become an official, you'll most likely need to adapt. The officials have their duties, and the ruler also has the duties of a ruler. The Lord is like a human head. She doesn't need to do everything well. She only needs to know which tasks are done by which people. Being diligent in government affairs was a good thing, but it was a pain in the ass to forcefully intervene in everything when one didn't know anything. In this world, not everyone was as omniscient and omnipotent as the Lord. There were too many fools who thought they were smart and pretended to know when they didn't know anything. There's something. After eating, Feng Yi showed a rare hesitation. I don't know. Qiguan Rang raised his eyebrows and noticed a faint blush on Feng Yi's face. Just say it. In the afternoon, I went to the main tent and saw. The Lord and Mr. Wei seemed to be a little intimate. Qiguan Rang said, don't worry about it. Don't make it public. Feng Yi was shocked. Those two are really, Qiguan Rang said. The man is unmarried and the woman is unmarried. They can do whatever they want. Why are you so surprised? Feng Yi was speechless. The man and the woman were unmarried? Feng Yi silently swallowed her sarcasm when she thought about the Lord and Wei Ci. Qiguan Rang said with a standard Buddhist expression, "Now that the war is almost over, it's time to look forward to the arrival of a young lord." After a while, he asked the guards to go into the mountains to look for wild animals that could enhance male vigor. Wei Zixiao's body was still a little thin. Feng Yi nodded slowly. Yes, the Lord still has no children. It's quite worrying. She pinched her fingers and counted. In a few months, the Lord would be 24 years old. It was indeed worrying to not have children at this age. At this moment, what was Jiang Pengji, who was supposed to stay in the main tent, doing? She was having a picnic outside and taking an afternoon nap on Wei Ci's lap. The group of salted fish were so envious that they were crying. My lord is in a good mood. Did you encounter a happy occasion? Jiang Pengji stared at his lips for a long time. Wei Ci felt uncomfortable and could not help but think of his impetuousness just now. How can you tell that I'm in a good mood? There's delicious food in front of me, but I can only taste a few mouthfuls. I'm so sad. Jiang Pengji's flirtatious words were inversely proportional to her moral integrity. Even though Wei Ci had been through hundreds of battles, he could not withstand it. Wei Ci's ears turned red as he listened to her teasing words that had a hidden meaning behind it. Don't be like that next time. Today. Wrongly seems. It was fine if Qiguan Rang and the others found out. Wei Ci's skin was thick enough to withstand it, but he was caught red-handed by a junior like Feng Yi. He was ashamed. He knew how vigilant his lord was. She must have sensed Feng Yi's approach, but she did not warn him. Jiang Pengji said, "When I was his age, I've watched a lot of movies. How can children nowadays be so pure?" Wei Ci was speechless. Although he did not understand, he vaguely felt that something was wrong. What's a lot of bases? Jiang Pengji said, "A moving fire avoidance map. 1G is probably a few sets, right?" Wei Ci was speechless. Jiang Pengji still thought that he was not embarrassed enough. She said, "If there's a chance in the future, I'll bring you to have a look. However, the figures of those people are not even 1% as good as Zixiao's. I don't even know why they like to look. I find it extremely boring. It's just that their postures are a little interesting." Jiang Pengji spent her youth in a training camp for genetic warriors. Some of her comrades who were not too serious bullied her because she was young. They teased her and said that it was interesting. Jiang Pengji actually looked at them all seriously. However, her insight was too terrifying. Those people were like skeletons in her eyes. She could not see what was good about them. Jiang Pengji said again, "Shall we try it when we return?" Wei Ci was speechless. He immediately supported his forehead with one hand, revealing a pair of red ears. "My lord, if you continue to be like this, I'll really be angry." He was fierce like a baby. Jiang Pengji smiled and said, Okay. I'll change. Don't be angry. As an apology, how about I tell you a piece of good news?" The flame that Wei Ci had just ignited was extinguished with a puff. "What news?" Jiang Pengji said, "Yang Tao has surrendered." Wei Ci was pleasantly surprised. "When did you receive the news?" Jiang Pengji said, "Just now. I'll probably receive the battle report in another 10 to 20 days. She was a fresh, tender, and juicy European emperor. The person who had transmigrated was Yang Tao's son's wet nurse. Chapter 1582. Ever since the first episode of 1,000 Years in a Dream, the lucky guy in the live streaming room had been through hundreds of battles. What had he not seen? Some of them were men dressed as women, some were women dressed as men, and some were dressed as non-human animals. There was no trace of where they landed or who they were. Some people were luckier and might be able to meet the streamer or the little angel under the streamer's account. They might even be able to bring back some local specialties or souvenirs. Some people were less lucky and would only transmigrate for 12 hours, returning without doing anything. It was precisely because of this unknown and variability that the idle fish especially liked to watch the European emperor's transmigration. They treated it like a wild variety show. There were even video websites that, in order to attract traffic, would edit a 12-hour-long video into a 1-hour variety show, adding various special effects, which actually attracted a lot of views. The lucky emperor would also receive a certain reward. It was a win-win situation. Some people who had nothing better to do would even launch a poll on the internet to guess whether the next European emperor would be a man or a woman, a human or an animal, a woman in a man's clothes, or a man in a woman's clothes, or a normal gender. In Jiang Pengji's opinion, it was really boring. Time flew by, and a brand new European king was about to appear. The salted fishes were especially excited every time this day came, and they used the speed of 20 years of being single to snatch a spot. Only by grabbing a seat in the live broadcast room would one be qualified to compete for the 1 in 5 million chance to become the real chosen one. To do Feiqiu. Ha ha ha, I got a spot and punch in. What time does Dream of a Millennium start today? Upstairs is a devil. You animals, did you build a commercial building in the live broadcast room? Zizai Xiaoyao. Sigh, I also want to buy a house in the streamer studio, but the price is too high. I can't afford it. Zizai Gezi. I'm waiting for the lucky draw. I went to Jintai Temple in Zhuhai to burn incense and pray to Buddha. While the salted fish were chattering and making a ruckus, Jiang Pengji brazenly took advantage of Wei Ci. She avoided the camera in the streaming room in a petty manner and used herself to block their line of sight. The salted fish could only see Wei Ci being hugged and kissed by her, but they could not see the details. She was openly giving out dog food. At first, the salted fishes would rise up in revolt, but after a while, they became numb to it. Some of the naughty salted fish would even watch the live stream while eating white rice. Together with the dog food distributed by the streamer, it was a delightful sight. Congratulations to the audience, Freelegs, for winning a slot in the X phase of the Dream of a Thousand Years event. As soon as the results came out, the newly minted European king said to his teammates, I'm going to transmigrate, you guys take care of yourselves. He cruelly unplugged his desktop computer and rolled around on the bed with his phone in his hand. However, he soon lost his smile. Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? He was holding a soft, milky bun in his arms, and the brain was grabbing the front of his shirt with its 2 little hands and burying its little head in his chest. Every time the child tugged, the European emperor would tremble. He was frozen on the spot, not knowing what to do. 5 million salted fish happily peeked through the small window to see the European emperor. They were shocked, and the bullet screen was filled with exclamation marks, question marks, and ellipses. Zizai Xiaoyao colon? Guaguang apple. Oh my god! Spectacle circle. Pft. Sexy European king, feeding milk online? This bullet screen expressed everyone's thoughts. Very soon, the salted fish, whose hand speed was off the charts, became a trending topic. Cat Demon King. Cough cough, European Emperor, be careful. Don't throw the child out of fear. This child might be the child of this body. In fact, when the European Emperor first came over, he was so scared that he wanted to throw the child out. However, this body had been holding the child for too long. His hands were numb, and his knees were stiff, so he could not put his action into practice. Yin's error and Yang's mistake saved his life. The European Emperor, Ing Qaq Ing. The chubby child spat out the thing in his mouth after a while, and groped for the other side. He did not know that the wet nurse who was hugging him had changed her core. Naturally, she did not understand his actions. He was anxious because he could not get any milk. The European Emperor panicked even more. Fortunately, the system kindly reminded him, so he knew to continue feeding the little ancestor in his arms to the other side. After tasting the food, the little fellow closed his eyes in satisfaction and continued. The European Emperor, who was at a loss, suddenly thought of a very serious problem. When he changed sides just now, did he see anything that he should not have seen in the live streaming room? Although it was not his own body, it was still very shameful to be exposed in front of so many people. Fortunately, the system warmly reminded him that there was a real-time code that would protect the privacy of the experiencer. The European Emperor then heaved a sigh of relief. What sigh of relief? He was about to suffocate. Ouch. The European Emperor did not have much experience, so he could not tell how old the child in his arms was. However, he knew that the child had small teeth that were like glutinous rice. When he was feeding, he accidentally bit a weak spot. It was so painful that tears almost came out of his eyes. However, he did not know the identity of this body, so he did not dare to act rashly, let alone beat the child up. The child smacked his lips in satisfaction when the food on both sides was swept clean. The European emperor was a first-year student. He was gentle, and occasionally indulged in RPG games. He did not have any bad habits. As for children, he did not like them, but he did not hate them either. Especially babies who did not cry or make a fuss. He could not harden his heart. He just felt a little wronged. It was not easy for him to transmigrate, but now he was being used as a milk bottle. The salted fish guided him from afar. The European emperor clumsily picked up the child vertically and let the child lie on his shoulder. He patted the child's back until the child burped with a milky fragrance. According to the salted fish, it was said that this was to prevent the child from choking on milk after eating too much. "What's your name?" The European emperor observed his surroundings while feeding. He found that the decorations around him did not look like an ordinary house, and the clothes the body was wearing were not bad either. "Sai, who are you to me?" The European emperor asked the child again. When he was about to ask the third question, the system notified him that someone was approaching. The European emperor immediately shut his mouth. "Little Lang Jun, are you full?" The woman who came in was a servant in her early 20s. Her hair was combed into a bun. "Yes." The European emperor answered according to the system's instructions. The less he said, the more mistakes he would make. The servant took the European emperor and the child to another room. On the way, they passed by a courtyard, and the European emperor's sharp ears heard a familiar voice. "Yang Si? Yen Lin? Yang Tao?" How did the three of them get together? For a moment, all kinds of conspiracy theories surfaced in his mind. Could it be that the thick-browed, big-eyed boy, Yang Si, betrayed the revolution? No, betrayed the host? He was so absorbed in his thoughts that the child in his arms felt uncomfortable. He suddenly burst into tears, which startled the people in the room. The European emperor held the child helplessly and blinked innocently at the servant who led the way. Chapter 1583. The servant woman scolded. "Aren't you going to coax the little Lang Jun? If you disturb the big shots in the house, how many lives do you have to pay?" This servant woman was not very old. To be honest, she was only 1 or 2 years older than the European emperor. She was about the same as a junior or senior. However, a junior or senior was only a young girl in society. But the servant woman in front of him was the inner courtyard manager who assisted Yen Xueqi in taking care of dozens of people in the backyard. In modern times, she could be regarded as the general manager of a medium-sized company. Her aura was very oppressive. The European emperor secretly swallowed his grievances and coaxed the crying little boy. He almost whispered in a pleading tone, "Little ancestor, please don't cry, okay? If you cry again, I will cry for you. I didn't pay attention to strangle you just now." The servant woman was a few steps away from the European emperor. The European emperor was begging baby in his arms with a voice that was almost in his mouth, so the servant woman did not hear what he said. Seeing that the little Lang Jun had not stopped crying, the servant woman's face fell. She was about to say something when she heard footsteps coming from the house. When the servant woman saw that it was Yang Tao, she immediately saluted and greeted him. The European emperor reacted a few beats slower. He saluted the boy in his arms and looked down to see a pair of feet wearing snow-white socks and wooden clogs. As he was guessing who this person was, the boy in his arms stopped crying and stretched out his hands to the person. Most of his body leaned toward the person. The European emperor was so scared that he hugged the boy tightly. The person seemed to notice his panic and worry and said gently, "It's okay. Let me hold him for a while." The little Bei was particularly well behaved in Yang Tao's arms. His watery black grape-like eyes were covered with some water vapor, looking pitiful and cute. "I have never seen such a clever little Lang Jun. Did he cry to attract your attention because he knew that Lord Zhengzi was in the house?" The European emperor twisted his sleeves anxiously, for fear that others would find out that the child was crying because he was strangling him. This was not a society ruled by law. The servants had no human rights. If they offended the master, they would be beaten to death. At this time, the European emperor heard the sound of nature. Xiao Rongrong, the handsome Yang Si, who he usually ridiculed for having no moral integrity, actually stood up for him and cleverly covered up the fault of the European emperor. At the same time, he praised the child. Even though Oh Huang had yet to enter society and the workplace, he knew that Yang Si was someone who knew how to talk. As a father, which father didn't like to hear such praises? Little Bei Bei did not know how to express himself, and he was at an age where he was full of energy and forgetful. When he saw his father, whom he liked very much, he forgot everything else and just pestered him to play. Seeing that the child was fine, Yang Tao naturally did not notice and believed Yang Xi's words of praise. My son likes to pester people when he's young. I've let Envoy Yang Xi a joke. Yang Tao took a few breaths of his son's milk fragrance and revealed a bright and beautiful smile. Even Yang Xi, an outsider, could feel that Yang Tao really liked the son. Yang Xi chuckled to himself. This Duke of Zhengze was indeed a peculiar person. He was exceptionally family-oriented and loved his own flesh and blood. Where are you going? Yang Tao casually asked. Oh Huang still hung his head down and did not dare to look up. He silently looked at the bullet screen and judged the reactions of Yang Tao and the others. On such occasions, the female servant at the side would naturally answer, and it was not his turn to interrupt. Of course, the most important thing was that he did not know what to say. Xueqi aggrieved. In fact, it was nothing much. It was just that Madame Yan Shuxian missed her son and wanted to see if the new wet nurse was to her liking. Hearing that it was a trivial matter in the inner residence, Yang Tao kissed his son, handed Bei Bei back to O Huang, and said, Go, don't let Madame wait for too long. O Huang had been following the live stream for many years. When he was free, he liked to browse the forum of the Empress and look at the posts that were sorted out by big hands. Since the start of the Dream of 1,000 Years event, these posts had been pinned at the top all year round. Everyone who had the ambition to become O Huang would look at the contents of these posts. Perhaps one day they would be lucky enough to transmigrate. In order not to expose themselves, they still had to understand the basics. Upon hearing Yang Tao's words, O Huang replied in a low voice. Other than looking a little shy, there was nothing strange about him. However, after O Huang left with the servant woman, Yang Tao found that Yang Xi still had a thoughtful look on his face as he stared at the back of the wet nurse. Yang Tao thought about the rumors about this person and his eyebrows twitched. Before Yang Xi and Feng Zhan settled down, they were both prodigal sons. However, Feng Zhan was unrestrained in the open, while Yang Xi was coquettish in the dark. Their reputations to the outside world were also different. Everyone knew how unrestrained Feng Zhan was, but they didn't pay much attention to Yang Xi, who was more low-key. Of course, as a former opponent, it was impossible for Yang Tao not to know the information of the main members of the enemy. This Yang Xi also didn't seem to be a very reliable person. Yang Tao thought for a while and tried to ask, Messenger Yang, do you know that wet nurse? Yang Xi withdrew his gaze and said, I don't know her, but she is a little. Yang Tao was shocked and asked, What is a little? Could it be that there was a problem with the identity of this wet nurse? If that was the case, he definitely couldn't let this woman get close to his son. Who knew what she was thinking? Yang Xi saw Yang Tao's grave expression and knew that the other party had misunderstood. He couldn't help but cough lightly to smooth things over. This person's side profile is somewhat similar to my wife's, and I was dazed when I saw her. Speaking of which, my wife also gave birth last year. I haven't seen her for a long time, and the child can recognize people now. Yang Tao didn't know that Yang Xi was actually married. However, Yang Xi was already over 30 years old, so it was normal for him to have a wife and a daughter. When he looked at the unfamiliar wet nurse just now, he was also touched by the scene and thought of his wife and daughter at home. Yang Tao expressed that he could understand. Yang Tao was easy to fool, but Yang Tao's external brain, Yan Lin, was not so easy to fool. First of all, he had never heard that Yang Xi had a family. The so-called wife and daughter were most likely not legally married, and it was still a question whether they existed. Second, Yang Xi's eyes didn't show attachment to his wife and daughter at all. It was more like he had seen something interesting and his curiosity was aroused. His mouth was full of nonsense, and it was unknown how many of his words were true. When Yang Tao heard that Yang Xi's daughter was the same age as his son, he joked, a son and a daughter. Maybe we can be in-laws in the future. Logically speaking, Yang Xi's status wasn't high enough to be Yang Tao's in-laws. Even if Yang Tao was a fallen feudal lord and Yang Xi was an important official in Jiang Pengji's camp, the current concept of bloodline meant that no matter how high Yang Xi climbed, his children would still be at a disadvantage. Yang Xi didn't take Yang Tao's suggestion seriously, but he also felt that it was appropriate and had a good impression of Yang Tao. Yan Lin, who was standing at the side, quietly poured a bucket of cold water on him. People of the same surname don't marry. Yangxi couldn't bear to see Yanlin gloating, so his mouth moved faster than his brain and said, "It doesn't matter. My daughter will follow my wife's surname." As soon as he said that, Yangxi wanted to slap himself. Chapter 1584. Yanlin and Yang Tao, on the other hand, were shocked. "Children, follow my mother's surname? Unheard of." Even if the husband and wife divorced, there was no reason for the child to follow the mother's surname. Could it be that Yangxi's wife and daughter were fabricated? Yang Tao was a little confused. He secretly asked his lost friend with his eyes. How should he continue this topic? After a while, Yangxi said, "Many years ago, my lord agreed to the decision of the soldiers in the female battalion to have an independent household. Although it's not perfect, it's possible for one household to have two households. My wife's background is special, so it's unlikely that she will be registered under my household register. It's fine if the child takes her surname." Hearing this, Yang Tao and Yanlin became curious about Yangxi's wife, who had never been heard of before. According to Yangxi's analysis, Yangxi's wife was most likely a member of the women's camp. Based on Yanlin's understanding of Yangxi, this man looked casual, but he was actually very demanding. His wife couldn't be an ordinary soldier either. She might be someone with a military rank or a real power. In this chaotic world, it was not easy for men or women to reach this stage. This was because the ways of the world were harsher and stricter to women. If a woman wanted to reach the same height, she had to put in more effort and toil than a man. From this it could be seen how outstanding that woman was. She was good in every aspect, but unfortunately, she was blind. Why was it snatched away by Yangxi? Yanlin was hesitant, but Yang Tao was much more casual. He asked directly, "If that's the case, I'm curious. What is your wife's name?" Yangxi hesitated for a moment. After all, his relationship with Colonel Jiang was tacitly acknowledged by everyone, but it had not been made public yet. "My wife's surname is Jiang." Martial artists did not have so many elaborate formalities, but Yangxi was a scholar. It was impossible for him to casually tell his wife's maiden name to a man outside. Yanlin and Yang Tao thought of a girl at the same time. Yang Tao was shocked. Could it be Jiang Nongqin, Field Officer Jiang? Yangxi said, "It's my wife." The number of warriors under Jiang Pengji's command wasn't small, but it wasn't large either. Apart from a few who had the ability to command troops independently, most of them came from the wilderness. Their shortcomings were very obvious. They could fight battles, but they couldn't lead troops. As the only female general who held military power, Jiang Nongqin was naturally the center of attention. According to the information obtained by the spies, this female general had always been unmarried. When did she have a husband and a daughter? Yang Tao looked at Yangxi with some eagerness in his eyes. If the child betrothal before was a joke, then this time, it was a little serious. Anyway, Yangxi had agreed just now. Yang Tao only needed to go with the flow. Yangxi was miserable. He tried to refuse, but Yanlin interrupted him. Yangxi was not in the mood to think about the wet nurse. Why was he thinking about this wet nurse? Of course, it was not because Yangxi had taken a fancy to her, but because of something else. To be precise, Yangxi had encountered a total of 2 mountain ghosts. Although these mountain ghosts didn't have any ill intentions, there was a saying that went, "Those who are not of our race are bound to have different intentions." Yangxi couldn't guarantee that these mountain ghosts wouldn't cause trouble at the critical moment. He carefully recalled the details of his brief interaction with Mountain Ghost, trying to find a common characteristic between the two. Because of his strong memory, recalling the details was like dragging the mouse to watch a video frame by frame, not missing a single detail. He didn't make any progress until he saw the wet nurse today. His heart was filled with good fortune, and a flash of inspiration appeared in his mind. He found a clue. Do they have anything in common? Yes. Whether it was the first mountain ghost of the fisherwoman, or the second mountain ghost of the physician, Yangxi had close contact with them. The first mountain ghost, a fisherwoman, sat on the deck and taught Xueqi shipbuilding. From his perspective, Yangxi could see her neck. It was faintly green, but he didn't take it seriously at the time. That was also the first time. How could Yangxi know that mountain ghosts would appear so frequently? The discovery of the second mountain ghost of the physician was purely an accident. Yangxi found that the other party's behavior was unusual. She wasn't from the women's camp, but she had more advanced and skilled trauma suturing skills than the women's camp medics. The soldiers sent out to investigate also got some clues from the fishermen. They all agreed that this doctor's medical skills were ordinary and there had never been a precedent of suturing. Thinking of the mountain ghost, Xueqi lied to the other party. As expected, the person gave himself away. Xueqi was very close at that time. With his height advantage, he did see some green lines on the back of the other party's neck. After a few hours, the mountain ghost left and the doctor returned to normal. From this, it could be seen that the mountain ghost stayed for a limited time, which confirmed the first mountain ghost story. When it was the turn of the third mountain ghost, the other party kept her head down the entire time. Her collar was relatively short, revealing a section of green lines. When Xueqi saw this, he suddenly thought of the two mountain ghosts from before. If this was the mark of the mountain ghost's possession, didn't it mean that there was something wrong with the wet nurse? Thinking of this, Xueqi secretly tested Yang Tao. From Yang Tao, he learned that Yan Shuxian, who was in charge of the inner residence, valued the child's new wet nurse very much. She didn't hire anyone with a bad smell, an ugly appearance, a lazy personality, a loose mouth, or a damaged skin. Among them, tattoos belonged to the category of damaged skin. In other words, this tattoo should have been obtained after the successful application. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for her to be hired. Although Xueqi didn't learn from the rangers to get tattoos to show off, he also knew that after the tattoo was done, the skin would feel uncomfortable for a while and it would take time to recuperate. This wet nurse had only been in office for a day or two. There was no time for the tattoo to return to normal. All kinds of inferences suggested that the wet nurse was most likely a mountain ghost. Only a wild spirit would have the ability to do something that didn't make sense to this extent. After coming to this conclusion, Xueqi wanted to meet the mountain ghost of the wet nurse. Not knowing that he was being watched by Xueqi, Lucky Emperor shuddered secretly. When Yan Shuxian met Lucky Emperor, she saw that he was a little shy but very dutiful. Her son also liked to drink his milk, so she allowed him to stay. Although Lucky Emperor didn't know how to chat, he could copy the flirtatious words from the Empress's forum. This amused Yan Shuxian, who had been depressed recently. The 5 million salted fishes were secretly jealous. They thought that Lucky Emperor would have a good show to watch when he was breastfeeding. They didn't expect him to turn around and flirt with a girl. Not only was he flirting with a girl, but the girl was actually Yang Tao's wife, Yan Lin's biological sister. This made the fans of both families grit their teeth in jealousy. Soon, Lucky Emperor was out of luck. Why? Because Xueqi found an excuse to see him. The salted fishes were stunned when they heard this. Could it be that the theme of today's live broadcast wasn't sexy Lucky Emperor breastfeeding, but scumbag Xueqi cheating on a woman online? A grown man suddenly wanted to see a married woman who was crouching in the inner courtyard breastfeeding. Put together, it made people's imagination run wild. Lucky Emperor didn't think it was messy enough. He asked anxiously, "If Master Yang wants to sleep with me, do you think I should comply or not?" The salted fishes were speechless. Chapter 1585. Although the European emperor was flirtatious, when he met Xueqi, he couldn't say anything. "Nice to meet you, messenger." The European emperor bowed to Xueqi as soon as he came up. He was trembling with fear and looked pitiful, which made Xueqi think that he was scary. "Do you know why I called you here?" Xueqi's eyes were as cold as water. He didn't deliberately use his aura to suppress the European emperor, but the European emperor felt terrified. It was like playing with a mobile phone by the window in high school. The teacher was standing outside the window and looking at the back of the European emperor's head with a cold face. Unspoken rules? The European emperor was also scared and very nervous. When he realized what he had said, he quickly changed his words. "I didn't mean that. I don't know why you called me here." Xueqi listened to the European emperor's lame speech with a cold face. He seamlessly switched between servant, and servant. The European emperor was too nervous. As an otaku who had just graduated from high school and entered college for less than 2 months, he blushed when talking to a girl. He dared to say all kinds of flirtatious words through the internet, but when it came to face, he couldn't even say a word. He was timid, weak, and pitiful. Xueqi also noticed this. He simply got up and walked to the European emperor. The European emperor was afraid to look at Xueqi. He lowered his head slightly and stared at Xueqi's socks. He thought to himself, "There's no foot odor?" Xueqi didn't know the European emperor's flirtatious words. In front of the 5 million people, he touched the European emperor's neck with his 2 fingertips. He curled his fingers slightly, and there was indeed a green line on the back of the European emperor's neck. Before he could react, the European emperor jumped up like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. The bullet screen in the streaming room was in an uproar. Zhang Pengji, who was far away in Zhanjiang Pass, also stared at Xueqi. What are you doing?" The European emperor grabbed his clothes with one hand and covered the back of his neck with the other. His cheeks were flushed, and his eyes were slightly red. He was obviously dressed like a married woman, but he revealed the shyness of a virgin girl. He cried out involuntarily, "How dare you sleep with me?" Xueqi looked at his fingers and was stunned for a moment. Then, he immediately burst out laughing. "I don't even know if you're a man or a woman. Did I sleep with you?" Xueqi was not a fool. From the tone and context in which the European emperor mentioned the unspoken rules twice, he roughly guessed what the unspoken rules meant. Humph, it was most likely something between a man and a woman. Even though he had settled down now, Xueqi was still a veteran when he was young. What kind of beauty had he not seen before? No matter how bad his taste was, he wouldn't fall for a married woman, right? Tell me honestly, why did you sneak into Yang Tao's residence? The more a person liked to laugh and act coquettishly, the more pressure they would give others when they were serious. Looking at Xueqi, Europe King was so scared that he almost cried, especially when Xueqi's dagger was still on his neck. What are you doing? I didn't provoke you." Xueqi sneered and spat out 2 words, which made the European emperor's body stiffen. Mountain ghost. Lucky Emperor was lying on the ground, and Xueqi's dagger was placed across his neck. The back of his neck was facing Xueqi, and the green tattoo was particularly eye-catching. This should be the sign of a mountain ghost possessing a mortal's body, right? Xueqi's fingers brushed past the skin, and there was no protrusion. It was as if it was not stabbed by an external force, but more like it was coming out from the inside. "I don't care how you mountain ghosts run around. I owe a debt of gratitude to your kind. I won't do anything to you because of this debt of gratitude. However, you have to tell me your purpose in coming to Yang Tao's residence. Don't you know that Yang Tao wants to surrender to my master? If something happens now, how many twists and turns will there be?" Both the European emperor and the salted fish in the live broadcast room were shocked by this turn of events. Sure enough, transmigration was not an easy job. These ancient people were more cunning than the other. Compared to them, Xueqi was more like a mountain spirit. Driven by a strong desire to live, the European emperor stammered, "I really don't have any bad intentions. I'm still confused. I'm a man, and I haven't even found a girlfriend yet, but I'm being used as a milk bottle by a child. I'm really at a disadvantage. I'm not a nanny." If he had known this earlier, he would have sat in front of the computer and continued to play games. It was better to nurse his teammates than to be breastfed by a little kid. Xueqi was speechless. Letting go of the dagger, the European emperor looked like a good woman who had been forced. Xueqi felt a headache coming on. "I've met a total of 3 mountain ghosts. The first one knows shipbuilding skills, and the second one is excellent at suturing wounds. What do you know?" In the face of such a blatant question, the European emperor's fragile heart shattered. He knelt down with a thud, looking as if he had suffered a great blow. "I admit that they're all big shots, but I'm just a rookie. However, I'm good at nursing people, and I'm proficient at it. If you were my teammate, I could help you ascend to the 12th stage." Xueqi was speechless. The 12th stage. He tried his best to analyze the European emperor's words and frowned. "I'm just an ordinary person. I can't cultivate and ascend." He could also hear that there were differences in the mountain ghosts. The first 2 were most likely accomplished in a certain aspect, but the one in front of him, perhaps even Yang Tao's son, could bully him. Thinking of this, Xueqi felt that it was boring and uninteresting. However, the mountain ghost in front of him was so innocent and harmless. Perhaps he could get some information out of him? Thinking of this, Xueqi's stomach began to rumble with black water. Didn't they say that mountain ghosts rarely appear in the world? Why are you guys possessing mortals one after another? The European emperor broke out in a cold sweat. He bit his lower lip and did not know how to answer. If he answered incorrectly, he might cause trouble to the people who came after him. Xueqi was too shrewd, and it was difficult for him to lie. One was deliberately trying to get information out of him, and the other was guilty and afraid. Xueqi trying to get information out of him was easier than eating and drinking. Not long after, Xueqi found out from the other party that the mountain ghosts did not appear in groups. They would appear once every 7 days and randomly possess a living creature. There are tens of millions of living people in the world, and there are countless other living creatures. Why did I encounter 3 mountain ghosts in a few months? The European emperor said with a bitter face, maybe it's because you're too lucky. The European emperor who encountered Xueqi was really unlucky, especially himself. He was simply unlucky. Xueqi asked, when did you possess this person? The European emperor looked at the time and said, 2 hours ago. He would possess a person for 7 days, and each possession would last for 12 hours. Xueqi silently noted down the time and pattern. It's not my place to interfere if you want to travel the world. However, I have a piece of advice that you should keep in mind. Xueqi's expression turned cold. What advice? Xueqi said, don't do anything that will hurt my master or hinder my master's hegemony. The European emperor was silent for a moment. He never expected that little Rongrong would have the attributes of a loyal dog. The anchor was really a woman that made people envious and jealous. Xueqi sneered and said, the tattoos on the back of your necks can't be concealed if you possess them, right? The European emperor looked confused and did not understand what Xueqi was talking about. Xueqi was speechless. Chapter 1586. Perhaps it was because the onlookers saw the game more clearly than the players. The salted fish would not be able to react to Xueqi's aura in person, but when they watched the live broadcast through the screen, their reaction speed was very fast. This was probably due to the bombardment of palace dramas. How scary the women in the palace dramas were. It was as if every word and every look carried a deep meaning. At this time, every salted fish was like a detective with an IQ of more than 200. Using a magnifying glass to dig out every hidden meaning. Of course, the salted fish would not be as nervous as the lucky emperor, so their brains worked quickly and they quickly figured out what he meant. Yutiandu. Well, did I hear it wrong? Is Boss Xueqi threatening us? Tudu Feicho. No, you didn't hear it wrong. He is threatening us, and it's a ridiculous threat. We are all the streamer's sweet little cotton-padded jackets. How could we do anything to hinder the streamer's hegemony? Xiao Cici's worried look is so cute. Guangchong Wuwang. That's not the point. The point is that the streamer saw Xueqi secretly expressing his loyalty. This boss will have a rich future in the future. The most important thing is that he has taken a big step toward marrying Jiang Xiaowei. If Jiang Xiaowei knew about this, her favorability would be off the charts. As salted fish who liked any popular couple, they once supported Jiang Pang and GX Jiang Nongqin's Frost Jiang. However, the streamer still chose Wei Ci, who was more popular. This made many lesbian fans of the cute couple wring their hands. Even though Jiang Nongqin and Xueqi had become a couple in the past 2 years, and they even got pregnant and gave birth to a daughter, the group of lesbian fans did not climb over the wall. Instead, they imagined a sadomasochistic love story. At the same time, they were even more happy to see Xueqi's recent situation of being a father and still being single. To return a beauty, one had to first increase the favorability of the lord, rival in love. It was a sour feeling. Looking at the salted fish's bullet screen, the originally nervous and afraid Oh Huang could not hold it in anymore. He burst out laughing. Xueqi's eyes narrowed and he asked, "What are you laughing at?" "Oh no." The lucky emperor's cheeks, which had been flushed with great difficulty, turned pale again. He said, "I just think you are thinking too much. I have no ill intentions." Whether the lucky emperor was swearing or something else, Xueqi would not easily believe him. He remained vigilant. Those who are not of the same race will surely have different intentions. Mountain Ghost was not a human, so how could he believe everything? After asking what he needed to ask, Xueqi let the European emperor leave. He didn't expect the European emperor to hesitate. He wanted to say something, but he didn't. Xueqi asked, "Is there anything else?" If there was nothing else, he would leave quickly. He still had to think of an excuse and write a letter to inform his lord of what had happened today. The European emperor blushed and said shyly, "Can you give me an autograph?" Yongxi laughed involuntarily. "You mountain ghosts like to collect signatures from mortals so much?" It seemed like the first fisherwoman mountain ghost he met also asked Yongxi and the others for an autograph before she left, saying that she would take it back as a souvenir. "I think you have a bright future ahead of you. Maybe you'll be a famous person in the history books. Your handwriting is worth collecting." Even though there was a lucky star born every 7 days, there were only a few people who had the chance to get close to Zhang Pengji and the others. Their autographs and personal accessories were all sold at high prices. The European emperor was not greedy. If he asked Yongxi for an expensive item, it was unlikely that Yongxi would agree. It was the same as a stranger asking for a mobile phone. However, if it was just an autograph, the European emperor felt that there was still hope. The lousy RPG game that he was obsessed with was too reliant on configuration. Unfortunately, he was poor and had no money to replace the expensive game notebook for that lousy game. If he had Yongxi's autograph and auctioned it online, he would have the money for the game notebook. He would have a lot of fun playing games in the future. In order to achieve his goal, the European emperor even said good things against his will and flattered Yongxi. As a person with backbone, if it wasn't for the small amount of money to buy the game notebook, he wouldn't have given in to Yongxi. Yongxi said with a smile, "That sounds nice. Since it sounds nice, sign a few more autographs for me." He took advantage of the situation and said, "Getting rich depends on you, big boobs." Yongxi was speechless. He suddenly felt that his previous conspiracy theories and worries were all for nothing. Why was he worried that the mountain ghosts might hinder his lord's hegemony and threaten his lord's safety? If the mountain ghosts were so naive and easy to fool, Yongxi would be worried about this race. Would they really die because of their naivety? Seeing this, the European emperor said, "Why do I feel that your expression and eyes seem to be despising me?" Yongxi denied it 3 times. "No, I didn't. Don't talk nonsense." The European emperor happily took Yongxi's autograph and his well-wishes and left, leaving Yongxi alone in a dilemma. He drew the tattoo on Empress O's neck with a good stroke and frowned slightly. Even though he was experienced and knowledgeable, he couldn't figure out the origin or meaning of the lines. "Forget it. Since one appears every 7 days, I'll just be careful in the future." If the mountain ghosts could hide the tattoo on the back of their neck, they wouldn't have exposed themselves in 3 consecutive times. If the mountain ghosts were really a threat, Yongxi could also use the pattern of their appearance and the symbol on the back of their neck to guard against them. The appearance of the European emperor was just an interlude. Yang Tao's surrender was the big deal. Using the European emperor's perspective, Zhang Pengji roughly pieced together what happened over there. The Nye family isn't a threat for the time being. Let them fight amongst themselves. But Xueqi's side is too restless and needs to be taught a lesson. Zhang Pengji said to Wei Ci, "Yang Tao's surrender has to be done by me personally. It's inconvenient for Jing Rong and the rest, and many things aren't easy to settle." Even though Yang Tao had surrendered, he was once a feudal lord and he had taken the initiative to surrender. It was different from being defeated and captured. It wasn't appropriate for Yongxi and the rest to show up, so they could only settle him down and wait for Zhang Pengji to come over and deal with it. A portion of the troops were left at Zhanjiang Pass to prevent the Nye family from making any changes. The rest could be pulled to Zhangzhou and try to take down Nanxing before the Nye family recovered. Once Nanxing was taken down, Zhongzhou would no longer be a concern. To prevent any accidents, Zhang Pengji specially asked Qiguanrang, Sun Wen, and the rest to stay. If the opportunity to attack Zhongzhou was ripe, they didn't need Zhang Pengji's consent. This was considered a complete delegation of power. Qiguanrang said, "The situation in Nanxing is unclear. Why don't you bring more people over, my lord? We can be at ease." Zhang Pengji asked, "Wenjing, do you have any suggestions?" Qiguanrang glanced in Wei Ci's direction and said, "Zixiao is cautious and thoughtful. He has also gone deep into Nanxing and has a good understanding of the situation there. My lord, you can bring him over. In addition, General Bai Ning is from Nanxing. Maybe he can be of use." Bai Ning was just an extra. Qiguanrang's goal was still Wei Ci. His lord was too self-disciplined. As a subject, he was also worried. He could only find an opportunity to get the two of them together. Maybe one day, the goddess of children would appear and send the young lord over? Why would Wei Ci stay at Zhanjiang Pass? It wasn't that he had to be there, but the young lord really had to be there. Zhang Pengji silently glanced at Qiguan Rang. Qiguan Rang silently looked back at her without a hint of fear. Feeling helpless, she said in private, "We're still at war. Be serious." Chapter 1587. I've lived for more than 70 years, but this is the first time I've been hastened. I feel like I have an additional mother-in-law. She needed time to prepare for the journey to Zhangzhou. As the lord, Zhang Pengji did not need to be busy. Naturally, someone would arrange everything for her. She had nothing to do and told Wei Ci about Qiguan Rang hastening his pregnancy. The latter's expression was like an overturned pallet. Zhang Pengji thought he was puzzled about the 70-plus years. She smiled faintly and explained, "The world I lived in my previous life is very different from this place. Ordinary people can easily live to 150 or 200 years old. Those who are strong and talented can even break through the limit and live to 300 or 400 years. As for me, although I have this potential, I'll most likely die in the line of duty because of my job. Don't think that I'm very old at 40 years old in my previous life. According to the average lifespan of this world, I'm considered to have just reached adulthood. I'm still young." Zhang Pengji emphasized the word young. She did not want others to say that she was an old cow that ate young grass. Moreover, Wei Ci's age in his previous life was not as young as Zhang Pengji's. Wei Ci laughed and said, "No, my lord, you've misunderstood. I'm just curious. Where did the term mother-in-law come from? If the lord compared Qiguan Rang to a mother-in-law, wouldn't Wei Ci have an additional mother for no reason?" Zhang Pengji said matter-of-factly, "Have you ever seen a father-in-law urge his son-in-law to have an heir as soon as possible? Usually, it was the mother-in-law or mother-in-law who hastened the pregnancy." Wei Ci held his forehead speechlessly. Was that the main point? Wasn't the main point why Wen Zhang was a mother-in-law and not a mother-in-law? Wei Ci felt relieved after thinking about it. His lord could not be the one who married, and he did not want to have a mother-in-law like Qiguan Rang. No matter which one it was, it sounded like a nightmare. Wen Zhang is also confused because of his concern. Wei Ci looked like he understood. As someone who had been through it, he had been anxious about the young lord's affairs in his previous life. He never expected the emperor to take a fancy to him. He inexplicably felt like he had shot himself in the foot. Wei Ci's mind was wandering. Zhang Pengji's words pulled him back to the human world. Zhang Pengji smiled and said, "A few days ago, he sent people into the mountains to look for wild animals that nourish yin and strengthen yang. Do you feel that your diet has changed?" Upon hearing this, Wei Ci's face immediately turned a little livid. Seeing his cute reaction, Zhang Pengji couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Wanjing, you're really... It's fine if you don't help Ci, but why are you mocking me?" Wei Ci held back for a long time but could not find the right words. Zhang Pengji, on the other hand, smiled happily and leaned half of her body toward him. To prevent Zhang Pengji from falling to the ground, Wei Ci stretched out his hands to support her. From an outsider's point of view, the two of them were in an intimate position. A third person could not intervene. How is this a mockery? Zhang Pengji cupped his cheeks with both hands and took a deep breath. Wei Ci turned his head with difficulty to avoid her and said with difficulty, "One must not have sex in broad daylight." Even though the two of them had a relationship that was not supposed to have, Wei Ci was still conservative in his bones. He was very conflicted about his lord's frequent intimacy. She was clearly very happy in her heart, but when she sobered up, she felt ashamed. From time to time this would happen. Wei Ci even suspected that he was the femme fatale in the eyes of others, seducing the originally wise and mighty monarch into indulging in his beauty. Even the empress in her previous life was not so passionate and open. She was especially reserved in her feelings and was even as indifferent as water. Zhang Pengji glanced at the clothes of the two of them. They had not taken off a single piece. This can be considered as sex in broad daylight? She smiled and said, "Zixiao's standards for sex in broad daylight are really low." Wei Ci coughed lightly. Seeing that Zhang Pengji's eyes seemed to have a strange look, he understood and changed the topic with a strong desire to survive. "Speaking of Wenjing's matter, I'm afraid it's not his idea alone. Jiang Pengji could not help but laugh, but she did not expose Wei Si's lame actions. Young lord, what will come will come. No matter what, we have to wait until Nanxing and Zhongzhou are conquered. Only when the world is stable can I have the energy to consider the matter of the heir. Due to the limitations of technology in this era, Jiang Pengji could not enjoy the benefits of waiting for a baby to be born after an operation. She had to give birth to the heir herself. Women used their bodies to give birth to life. There were many inconveniences in life. She had to make thorough preparations before considering this. Anyway, our bodies are not bad and we don't have bad habits. Maybe we can have a child in one go. Wei Si agreed with this. In the previous life, Her Highness Jiang Yan was born not long after their first time. At that time, their physical conditions were not as good as in this life. From the time Her Majesty discovered that she was pregnant to the time she gave birth, everything went smoothly. Her Highness Jiang Yan was born in only 2 hours. However, there was an unforeseen event when she gave birth to Wei Kong. The delivery room was mixed with something evil. It was difficult to give birth to that unfilial son after a day and a night. When talking about children, Wei Si was easily distracted. My lord is in good health. You can have the young lord at any time. On the other hand, Wan Jing and the others have to wait. Jiang Pengji said, what is obtained too easily is often not cherished. Let them look forward to it so much that their necks grow, and they will know how to cherish it. Wei Si thought of the previous life and could not help but laugh. My lord, aren't you afraid that the young lord will be spoiled? Do you think that's possible? They don't even spoil their own children. How can they spoil the young lord? Jiang Pengji had seen the children of the next generation. None of them were crooked, especially Feng Zhen's family. If the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be straight. That's true. They are already deeply grateful to have a young lord. They look forward to becoming dragons and phoenixes. How would they dare to spoil others? In the previous life, Jiang Yan was also highly anticipated by everyone. Even though she was a girl, no one said anything about it. She was raised according to the standards of the crown prince in all aspects. Even when Her Majesty was pregnant with another child, apart from most of the disloyal fellows, Qiguan Rang and a few others were the few officials who did not propose to abolish the crown prince, Jiang Yan, and cultivate a male heir again. Their political stance was also biased towards Jiang Yan. Of course, this was also related to Crown Prince Zhang's premature death at birth. If Fu Shou had not faked his death and hidden, Her Majesty and Her Highness Jiang Yan would have been in danger. It would not have been easy for Jiang Yan to win against her brother. You're distracted again. This is the 3rd time. Jiang Pengji gently pinched his cheeks. Recently, she had been feeding him delicious food. Why did his cheeks not grow fat? Wei Si said, I can't help but think of Fu Shou. Jiang Pengji said, why do you think of him? She had seen 2 children in Wei Si's spiritual world. The child named Wei Tsong was quite likable. He looked like Wei Si. Wei Si said, as a father, I didn't do my duty to teach him and caused him to go astray. I'm ashamed of Her Majesty's trust. Wei Zixiao, I've tolerated it for a long time. Jiang Pengji's face darkened when she heard that. She pinched his cheeks with both hands and pretended to be angry. Don't you think it's too much to mention another woman in front of me? Look at the color of my head. You can even breed horses on my head. Chapter 1588. Are you being jealous of yourself, my lord? Wei Si asked with some uncertainty, but the corners of his lips could not help but curl up. He was already in his 70s in both his previous and previous lives, but his mentality now was like that of a reckless boy who had just awakened to love. If his sweetheart was willing to pay more attention to him and look at him more, he could not help but be overjoyed. Jiang Pengji admitted it openly and said, so what if I am? Even if Her Majesty in your previous life was me, I don't have that memory. To me, she is another person. You always feel sad when you mention her. Isn't it normal for me to be jealous? She was not like the man in front of her who said one thing but meant another. She had seen through Wei Si's temperament. He said whatever he wanted to say. She did not expect his brain to guess the feelings she wanted to express. She admitted that she was jealous. So what? Wei Si held back his laughter and said, my lord and I are almost 150 years old. We are an old couple. Let's not talk about this. Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows and pouted. Tell me honestly, in your heart, who is more important, me or your majesty? Wei Ci was speechless. His strong desire to live told him that this was a terrible question that would kill him. Even though Wei Ci was usually eloquent, he did not dare to answer rashly for fear of stepping on a landmine. In a dilemma, he could only seek help from the culprit who looked at him with a faint smile. How do you think I should answer, my lord? Jiang Pengji said. Lust. What? Lust. Jiang Pengji gestured a peace sign. There are no lovers' conflicts that can't be settled with a kiss. If there are, then kiss both of us. Wei Ci was speechless. Even though Wei Ci had seen all kinds of storms, he still could not withstand his lord's flirtatious tricks from time to time. Sometimes he wondered if he was blind. Her Majesty and his lord were clearly the same person. The former was cold and reserved. She would occasionally laugh heartily and was rarely affectionate. The latter seemed to dig out all her feelings, making him unable to resist. Even so, he had to accept it even if he could not resist it. After all, she was the person he looked up to, chased after, and loved for 2 lifetimes. Their relationship grew steadily. Jiang Pengji was not a petty person. She often shared her feelings with others. For example, if Wei Ci sent her supper in the middle of the night, she would turn on a live broadcast to abuse the single men in the middle of the night. Why did he say that he was abusing the single dogs? Which couple with a nightlife would fight for a spot in the live broadcast room at this time? Only single dogs would stop to play games, play on their phones, and watch live streams. Adults who were no longer single were all enjoying life. Therefore, during this period of time, the streaming room was filled with the wails and cries of the salted fish. It was as lively as the new year. Only Jiang Pengji was happy. Her happiness was built on the pain of 5 million salted fish, so it was precious to savor it. Fortunately, these painful days did not last for too long. Tudu Feiqiu. Thank you, Boss Chiguan. I've finally completed the prerequisites for the expedition. Otherwise, the host would have gone crazy. Little luck. Thank you too. The host seems to have taken the wrong medicine these days. She's been showing off her love life. The whole world knows that she's no longer single. Have a dream is great. Wrong. It's not the whole world. It's 2 dimensions. 12 billion people know that she's no longer single. Jiang Pengji changed into her military uniform again and leaped onto the horse's back. Let's go. The towering mountains near Zhanjiang Pass slowly descended into the horizon behind her. Qiguan Rang and the others stood on the city wall and watched the army leave. They were bathed in the afterglow of the setting sun. Their bodies seemed to be surrounded by a golden glow. If we can take down Nanxing this time, the world will be within reach. Qiguan Rang's voice was not loud, but it had a certain power, as if he was talking about the future. Sun Wen corrected him. It's not the world will be within reach. It's clearly, the golden age will be within reach. Yes, the golden age will be within reach. Qiguan Rang revealed a rare smile. We have to work hard too. We don't want to be a burden to our lord. Sun Wen raised his eyebrows. He did not think that Qiguan Rang's words were said casually. They were obviously filled with ambition. What do you plan to do? Qiguan Rang replied. Of course, I want to make Zhongzhou even more chaotic. I want them to be tired of fighting amongst themselves. If possible, I can even coordinate with them from the inside. Speaking of sowing discord, Qiguan Rang was also an expert. He was no weaker than Sun Wen when he provoked the 3 tribes of the northern borderline. From what you're saying, you plan to secretly support the forces in Zhongzhou. The situation in Zhongzhou was already chaotic enough, but in the eyes of the 2, it was still lacking. They still needed to fan the flames. If we personally send troops, it will easily backfire and cause the aristocratic families of Zhongzhou to unite against the external threat. Qiguan Rang understood this point very well. Once there was a common enemy and a greater hatred, former enemies could also temporarily become allies and unite against the external threat. This was not what Qiguan Rang wanted to see. It's better to secretly support one person and use the other party's hand to plant informants and instigate more intense internal strife. The fiercer the internal strife in Zhongzhou, the greater Qiguan Rang's profits would be. Qiguan Rang was not worried that no one would be willing to cooperate with him. Standing in front of sufficiently tempting benefits, not many people could resist, let alone those who only had ambition but no intelligence to match it. Qiguan Rang asked Sun Wen, "Zai Dao, what do you think?" Sun Wen smiled and said, "Very good." He had settled a portion of the enmity with the Nye family, but it was far from enough. To uproot the Nye family, as the Lord, Jiang Pengji still had to reach a higher position. If she could take Zhongzhao into her own hands, what would the Nye family amount to? Sun Wen naturally agreed with Qiguan Rang's suggestion. Putting aside their plans for the time being, Jiang Pengji began her boring march. Zhanjiang Pass was not very far from Zhangzhou. Riding horses at full speed, coupled with the waterway, one could usually reach it in half a month or 20 days. However, Jiang Pengji brought along 50,000 troops and horses. Naturally, the speed of the army could not be compared to the speed of the messenger. Overall, it was much slower. On the 10th day of the march, the scouts of the army stopped a messenger. After interrogating him, they found out that the messenger was coming for Jiang Pengji. Jiang Pengji took off her thick military uniform and changed into a black robe with arrow sleeves. The hem of the robe was shortened by her. It barely reached her knees. Paired with long pants, it was more convenient to move around. The audience in the streaming room had taught her to make the robe. They had recommended it to her, saying that they wanted to see how she looked like in the robe. Jiang Pengji had people make the robe according to the words given by the audience. It was indeed very comfortable to wear and looked heroic and free. No one had seen this style of clothing before. It was a little foreign, but Jiang Pengji was the Lord. Even if they had not seen it before, no one dared to say anything. She had ridden for the whole day. At that moment, she was sitting in the tent, washing her hands and preparing to eat. "Messenger," Jiang Pengji said. "Let him in. Is there any change at the front line in Zhangzhou?" Unbeknownst to them, Jiang Pengji had hit the nail on the head. The messenger entered the tent and half knelt to report. It was just a few words, but everyone in the tent was so shocked that they could not react. Wei Ci, who was helping Jiang Pengji set the bowls and chopsticks, trembled. A pair of chopsticks fell on the table with a clang. Chapter 1589. Yang Tao? Rebelling with his troops? Jiang Pengji was stunned for a moment. She calmly reached out to tidy up the ivory chopsticks on the table and took the rice bowl that Wei Ci had filled. Wei Ci came back to his senses and quietly stepped aside. Jiang Pengji asked the messenger, "What's going on? Tell me everything in detail." Was Yang Tao's brain filled with water or kicked by a donkey? Otherwise, why would he do such a stupid thing? He led his troops to surrender, and there were only slightly more than 20,000 remnant troops under his command. Nearly half of these remnant troops had been used by Yang Si to break them up and transfer them to other places with honorable reasons. In other words, Yang Tao only had about 10,000 troops at his disposal. What could he use to rebel? When Jiang Pengji heard the absurd news, she was not shocked or angry. Instead, she was confused. Even with her brain, she couldn't figure out how Yang Tao would betray her after pledging allegiance. Was he going to openly send his head to her? Jiang Pengji was not the only one who thought so. Many people who were watching the live stream were also shocked by Yang Tao's actions. Don't be unsatisfied. Although it's normal to fake surrender when two armies fight, it's not a jack of all trades. It can't be used at all times. It depends on the situation. Yang Tao's actions were like throwing an egg against a stone. It was no different from seeking death. Love 36 stratagems. Yang Tao faked his surrender and rebelled. He almost handed the streamer a knife that could stab him to death without tarnishing his reputation. Even if he's stupid, the people around him shouldn't be brainless, right? Streamer, I think there's something fishy about this. Liang Tian Xueqi too. I think there's something fishy too. Maybe there's an inside story? Luo Luo Peanut Candy, Yang Tao is stupid, but Yan Lin definitely has a brain. He wouldn't let Yang Tao do this, would he? Historical experience tells us that the officials who surrender can still live. At most, they will change to a different monarch. But the enemy leader who surrenders will not have it so easy. Yang Tao didn't tuck his tail between his legs and reduce his presence to avoid becoming a thorn in the streamer's side. How dare he jump out and court death? Jiang Pengji's career fans analyzed the situation seriously, while the gossip fans were focused on talking nonsense and watching the show. For them, They didn't care who was killed by the streamer, as long as they enjoyed watching. Amidst everyone's anticipation, the messenger told the truth one by one. Jiang Pengji frowned slightly after hearing that, but Wei Ci, who was beside her, relaxed his expression. Instead, he revealed an expression that said, "As expected." Without waiting for Wei Ci to speak, Jiang Pengji said to the messenger, "I already know about this. Go back and tell military advisor Yang to pay attention to Nanqing's army. Don't let them take advantage of the situation. Let's not deal with Yang Tao's matter for the time being. We'll make a decision after I arrive with the army." Hearing that Jiang Pengji didn't plan to deal with Yang Tao, the salted fish couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. If Yang Tao was hacked to death by the host, wouldn't there be one less male god in this world that they could lick up to? After Jiang Pengji finished speaking, the messenger accepted the order and retreated. The others in the tent also retreated tactfully. "Zixiao, do you have anything to say?" Jiang Pengji raised her hand and picked up the ivory chopsticks that were placed neatly on the table. Her left hand held a black lacquered wooden bowl that was twice the size of her palm. Wei Ci stood up and served the meat dishes and soup that were not served to the table. He looked like a virtuous husband and father. Wei Ci smiled and said, "Seeing your expression, I know that you have already made up your mind. I'm afraid that there is more to Yang Tao's betrayal than meets the eye." It was not that they believed in Yang Tao's character and thought that he would never betray them once he surrendered. It was simply that betrayal would not benefit Yang Tao at all. Instead, it would bring about the destruction of his entire clan. After questioning the messenger in detail just now, Jiang Pengji had other conjectures. Jiang Pengji said, "If this matter is not handled properly, Yang Tao will be accused of leading the troops to rebel without any explanation. That will be terrible." Moreover, Yang Tao did not rebel at all. Jiang Pengji had a simple lunch. The army continued their journey, but her brows were still tightly knitted. Because the weather had turned cold and the nights were longer than the days, the sky quickly darkened. If she had not received the battle report that day, she would have stopped to rest and reorganize. Now, she had to seize the time to advance. She asked her men to walk in the dock for more than 4 hours. Only when everyone was tired did she give the order to stop. Jiang Pengji stayed in the simple tent and thought about the day's matters. Wei Ci brought someone to bring her a small bucket of hot water and a large portion of supper. She sniffed and smiled. As expected, Zixiao understands me better. "My lord, go wash your hands and face first. You can eat after soaking your feet," Wei Ci said. "You've been on the road for the whole day. You should relieve your fatigue." This was just a small matter. Of course, Jiang Pengji would not reject his good intentions. She simply used the hot water to wipe her exposed skin. Her fatigue eased a lot. At this time, eating to her heart's content was better than being a deity. She ate until she was 80% full. She could not help but burp. Zixiao's culinary skills are really getting better and better. When we retire in the future, you can open a small restaurant. I'll be the shopkeeper and collect money for you. Wei Ci could not help but laugh. "My lord, are you in a better mood now?" "Much better. Indeed, there is nothing that a good meal can't solve. If there is, then I'll have 2 meals. Jiang Pengji opened her mouth and made Wei Ci blush every time. The delicious food made by Zixiao's skillful hands is even more powerful. Wei Ci withdrew his hand. Don't think that he did not feel that she was taking advantage of the situation. Yang Tao's matter is inexplicably in line with the previous life. There's a 99% chance that it's not a rebellion. Jiang Pengji picked her teeth with a toothpick. She was not surprised by Wei Ci's words at all. She asked, "Did something similar happen in the previous life?" "Indeed," Wei Ci said leisurely. Her Majesty also took this opportunity to recruit Yang Tao as a general. According to normal procedures, Yang Tao would most likely be placed under house arrest and become a second Huang Song. Every day, when he opened his eyes, he only had to think about what to eat and what fun to play. However, in the previous life, Yang Tao became a commander who was second only to Fu Wang. Although Yang Tao was only ranked 5th on the martial list of the Jinling Pavilion, his status was higher than the 4th and 3rd. When the Zhang dynasty founded the country, Yang Tao was also the only person who was conferred a title of nobility of a higher rank. Although this title was not hereditary and had a lot of embellishment, Because Yang Tao was a vassal who surrendered, he needed to be conferred an additional title to appease the old officials of Yang Tao's lineage. But to be able to obtain this honor, his strength was undoubtedly very good at fighting. It could be said that apart from Her Majesty, Yang Tao was the biggest winner in life among the vassals in troubled times. The turning point of all this was after Yang Tao surrendered. The city that he temporarily lived in was ambushed by the enemy. There were not many guards there. Yang Tao's entire family was in the city. He took the risk of being suspected by Her Majesty and then punished and executed. He mobilized his old subordinates to resist the invading enemy and made a great contribution. Wei Ci carefully pondered the message sent by the messenger. Strangely, he realized that Yang Tao's experience in this life was different from his previous life, but he was just as lucky. Chapter 1590. Wei Ci said with a jealous and bitter expression, "Otherwise, why would they say that he is a capable person who entered the Golden Scale Pavilion?" Zhang Pengji said, "From what you said, it seems that Zixiao didn't go in?" When Wei Ci laid his cards on the table with her, he told her many things about his past life, such as the civil and martial arts role of the Golden Scale Pavilion. The Golden Scale Pavilion in the previous life was not the same as the Golden Scale Pavilion in the present life. The Golden Scale Pavilion in the present life was a super large library that was open to the public for free. The Golden Scale Pavilion in the previous life was a glorious holy land that all the scholars and martial artists in the world yearned for. This place was also known as the Path to Heaven, implying that one could ascend to heaven with a single step. The royal family of the Zhang dynasty had set a strict rule that only the civil and military officials who had made great contributions to the people, the country, the imperial court, and the emperor were qualified to have their portraits in the Golden Scale Pavilion and enjoy the worship of the people just like the royal family. In front of the Golden Scale Pavilion, not to mention the ordinary civil and military officials, even the emperor himself had to get off his horse, get off his sedan, and walk up the hundreds of steps. This kind of glory wasn't as simple as bringing honor to one's ancestors. It was a true legacy. Who wouldn't be moved? Don't people live for fame and fortune? The glory of the Golden Scale Pavilion was the goal that civil and military officials would strive for their entire lives when they entered the imperial court. Wei Ci was a commoner, not a saint. Of course, he also wanted to. Due to certain reasons, Wei Ci did not mention whether he had achieved this achievement or not. His lord did not ask too much either. Now that he was exposed, he felt bitter in his heart. Wei Ci looked dejected and sighed. "Of course, there isn't," Zhang Pengji comforted him. "It's okay. Even if you can't enter the civil and martial arts role of the Golden Scale Pavilion, entering the coffin of the #1 empress in the world is still worth it. Live in the same quilt, die in the same hole?" How would Wei Ci dare to think about it? In his previous life, less than 4 hours after His Majesty's ascension to the throne, that brat Wei Tsong was used by the landowning households. He brought people to force His Majesty to abdicate the throne and said that he was Crown Prince Zhang Zhua. In such a dangerous situation, not to mention Wei Ci, even the Crown Prince Zhang Yan was very passive and was almost forced to a dead end. What else could Wei Ci do when his son, whom he had personally raised, did such a disgraceful thing? He was only a powerless grand tutor. The only thing he could do was insist that Wei Tsong was his biological son. He reprimanded his biological son for committing treason by impersonating the deceased Crown Prince Zhang Zhua in an attempt to overthrow the universe. In the end, Wei Tsong committed suicide to atone for his crimes and followed the former emperor. As long as there was no evidence, Jiang Yan could seize the opportunity to attack and label Wei Tsong as a traitor. However, his only daughter had suffered because of this. Within a day, his mother passed away, his father committed suicide, his younger brother rebelled and was killed, and all his blood relatives were wiped out. Under such circumstances, if Jiang Yan didn't hate him, he would be grateful. Why would he ask Jiang Yan to bury his body in the imperial tomb? Wei Ci sighed. "I'm just a lowly person. How would I dare to enter the emperor's mausoleum and serve His Majesty?" Zhang Pengji squinted her eyes and pinched his face. "You should just give up for the rest of your life. Don't even think about sleeping anywhere else besides my coffin." Wei Ci could not help but reveal a faint smile. "Yes, Ci obeys." Zhang Pengji's boiling jealousy subsided. The two of them returned to the topic that had gone off the rails. "We've gone off the rails. Let's continue talking about Yang Tao," Zhang Pengji said. "Tell me more about his past life." Xueqi did not dare to hide anything. However, when His Majesty subdued Yang Tao, Xueqi was still working under Shui. What he knew was what he found out later, and some parts were not very detailed. He said, "I have some suspicions that Yan Lin was the one who planned Yang Tao's attack." "Don't doubt it. It must be his masterpiece," Zhang Pengji said grumpily. "But I don't think Yan Lin planned that far ahead. He did this to gain leverage for Yang Tao, so that he wouldn't be restricted and suppressed after he surrendered." What a touching brotherly bond. Even at a time like this, he didn't forget to plan for the greatest benefit for Yang Tao. After thinking about it, he ended up plotting against me. After sorting out Yan Lin's plan and confirming his opponent's purpose, the process was easy to understand. Yang Tao and Zhang Pengji had a grudge. Now that he only brought 20,000 soldiers to surrender, not only would she look down on him, but he would also be in a difficult position in the future. How could he improve Yang Tao's position in the future? Yan Lin racked his brains for a plan. Coincidentally, a perfect opportunity presented itself. If he could make good use of this opportunity, Yang Tao's future would be rich and prosperous. It turned out that the Nanxing rebel army that betrayed Yang Tao had surrendered to Shui. As Shui's vanguard, they tried to attack Zhangzhou, which was under Zhang Pengji's control. Yang Tao and his family were located in a city at the front line. It was not a place that the military would fight for, and the war was meaningless. Yang Si arranged for Yang Tao and his remaining soldiers to stay there so that they could be monitored and at the same time, wait for Zhang Pengji's army to arrive. He never expected that the Nanxing rebel army would target this place and use it as a springboard to test the waters. When Yang Tao and the others received the news that there were enemies outside the city, he was also dumbfounded. Yan Lin realized that this was a godsend opportunity. There were few soldiers guarding the city. There were only Yang Tao's remaining soldiers and the low-level veterans in the city. It would take some time for Yang Si's reinforcements to arrive. If Nanxing's enemy took the opportunity to launch a sneak attack on the city, the defenseless city would definitely fall. Needless to say, the consequences would be dire. If Yang Tao seized the opportunity to lead his troops to defend or even kill the invading enemy, he would have made a great contribution. Even if Zhang Pengji suspected that Yang Tao had led his troops to rebel, it would be fine. The more suspicious she was, the more advantageous it would be for Yang Tao later on. For the sake of her reputation and to appease Yang Tao's old subordinates, she had to treat Yang Tao well and ensure that his family would be wealthy. Whether it was in her previous life or this one, it was all part of Yan Lin's plan. However, Yan Lin probably didn't expect Yang Tao to use this opportunity to make a comeback. His gains were far more than he had expected. Xueqi said, "If it wasn't you, my lord, but someone else, Yan Lin's plan would at most protect Yang Tao's wealth for the rest of his life." Zhang Pengji said, "Isn't Yan Lin's plan for this lifetime of wealth? From this point of view, he has achieved his goal." Even though she had been tricked, Zhang Pengji didn't feel angry. At most, she was a little depressed. At the same time, Yang Tao was also very nervous. But since his companion was so confident, he would go crazy with her. Just as Chen Su had said, Yan Lin dared to plot anything, but Yang Tao dared to believe in everything. Even though he knew that his plan would fail and that he would lose his life, he still dared to try. It wasn't that Yang Tao didn't have his own ideas. It was just that he trusted Yan Lin wholeheartedly. By now, Lu Shi should have received news of Zhangzi leading his troops to rebel, right? Chen Su smiled bitterly. "Xiaoyang, aren't you afraid that Lu Shi will do something to my lord in a fit of rage?" Yan Lin smiled sarcastically. Chapter 1591. Chen Su sighed. "Because I'm not stupid. I thought you would be in danger." There were coincidences in the world, but most coincidences were driven by someone, such as Yan Lin's game of chess. Yang Tao had been extremely lucky in both lives. Even though the beginning and the process were different, the results were the same. Was it really history correcting itself? Not really. Among all the princes who had fallen from grace, Yang Tao was the only one with 90% luck. From a certain point of view, even Zhang Pengji, who was the last to ascend the throne, was not as lucky. After she ascended the throne, she plotted against the officials, the aristocrats, and the poor families for 18 years. Long Yubin, the empress, almost lost a son and a daughter. On the other hand, Yang Tao was a winner in life. He held a high position, had many children, and finally enjoyed his old age. Of course, luck and coincidences played a part, but there was also a lot of planning and calculation. As Yan Lin's friend, Chen Su didn't dare to say he knew everything, but he knew 90% of what Yan Lin had been planning. Why did Nanqing's enemy choose the small town where Yang Tao was located? Why did Jiang Pengji's troops, who were monitoring Yang Tao's remaining troops, not discover the enemy's tracks? Why did the messenger send Jiang Pengji the news that Yang Tao was rebelling with his troops before all the details were clear? To put it bluntly, this was Yan Lin's plan. 30% of the time and 70% of the people had led to the current situation. All he wanted was to push Yang Tao to the safest position. Nanqing's enemy's original intention was not to attack the small town. Instead, they wanted to bypass the town and attack another place. Yan Lin discovered their tracks but did not tell anyone. Instead, he secretly sent someone to contact them and deceive them with promises, such as helping them open the city and surrender. To increase his credibility, he even revealed the location of several granaries under Jiang Pengji's control. Of course, Yan Lin did not know where Jiang Pengji's granaries were. This information was the most confidential of secrets. He had no right to know. However, Yan Lin was born and raised in Zhangzhou. He knew very well where the granaries were. Naturally, the enemy would not be able to see through it. On one hand, he lured the enemy to the small town. On the other hand, he detained the eyes and ears of the nearby army supervisors. This would hinder their judgment and make them think that Yang Tao had made a deal with Nanqing's enemy. Thus, they would make the wrong judgment and confuse both sides. When the enemy arrived at the city, Yan Lin would reason with Yang Tao and encourage him to wear leather armor for the sake of his family. He would lead his former troops and the old soldiers in the city to fight the enemy. One had to know that Yang Tao's current status was that of a feudal vassal who was waiting to formally surrender. In order to avoid danger, he had reduced his contact with his former vassals as much as possible, not to mention regaining his military power and leading troops to do anything. If there was a misunderstanding, the supervisor sent by Yang Si would suspect that Yang Tao was leading the troops to feign surrender. The consequences would be dire. However, as Chen Yan Su would say, Yang Yan Yang Lin Yang and could. Yang Yan could. If. As Yan Yang as he as and could as. The enemy was already at the gates of the city, but the army supervisor had yet to arrive. If Yang Tao did not think of a way to save himself, was he supposed to just watch the enemy take down this small city that was easy to attack but hard to defend, then capture his family and leave? Of course not. Even though Yang Tao had surrendered, his former troops were still loyal to him. They were willing to listen to his orders. The soldiers in the city had no opinion of their own. Outside the city, there were enemies everywhere. They had no choice but to listen to Yang Tao's orders. They had been tricked without knowing it. After doing all that, Yan Lin played a game of the thief calling the thief. According to the thinking of a normal person, they would usually slander the enemy. Who would suspect that they would slander themselves? Yan Lin took advantage of the lag of the news, the time difference, and the blind spots in his thinking. He made use of Yang Si to send Jiang Pengji the wrong information. Even if Yang Si came to his senses later and sent the correct information, Yan Lin would have achieved his goal. Chen Su was impressed by Yan Lin's audacity. If the information was leaked, Yang Tao would be fine, but Yan Lin might not. However, Yan Lin did not care. It's okay. I know what I'm doing. Chen Su said, it's good that you know how to protect yourself. Otherwise, if the Lord finds out, she will feel guilty. Yan Lin smiled. I have known the Lord for more than 20 years. We know each other. Even if he finds out, he will understand. After all, this was not the first time Yan Lin had cleaned up Yang Tao's mess since he was a kid. Yang Tao was used to it. Chen Su snorted and said sourly, I know you two are close friends. You don't have to brag about it in front of me. Yan Lin said, even if Lu Shi knows what happened, it is unlikely that he will blame me. Maybe this is an opportunity. The bigger Jiang Pengji's business was, the more talented people would try to get close to her. When there were more people, there would be less attention for each person. Naturally, there would be fewer opportunities. Apart from the old people, it would be much more difficult for new people to make a name for themselves. It would also be harder for them to get promoted and be put in an important position. Yan Lin was not a stubborn person. Assisting Yang Tao was his first choice. If he did not have this option, he would have chosen something else. If he could make a name for himself in Jiang Pengji's camp, it would be easier for him to take care of Yang Tao in the future. After all, he had to show respect for Yang Tao. If there were blind people who tried to harm Yang Tao, Yan Lin's power would more or less make the other party wary. What he was afraid of was that he did not have any cards up his sleeves. If he ran into trouble in the future, no one would be able to help him. Most of the time, staying aloof from the outside world did not mean staying away from it. Yan Lin had been living in a chaotic world for a few years. He knew what it felt like to be powerless. He was at the mercy of others and had no control over his own life. Whether it was for himself, for his family, or for Yang Tao, his sister and his nephew, he had to do what he had to do. I hope you didn't make a mistake this time. Chen Su understood Yan Lin's difficulties. She could only smile bitterly and support him. Yan Lin smiled. I am not a god. How can I control everything? I just do my best and leave the rest to fate. While they were talking, Yang Tao had just finished clearing the battlefield. Although the terrain did not give them much of an advantage, the enemies of Nansheng were not elites. In Yang Tao's eyes, they were just a motley crew. It was just that they had more people. The two sides, one attacking and the other defending, fought for several days. The city gate was not broken, and the walls were not lost. Instead, they won several battles in a row. Because of the victory, Yang Tao's life was no longer in danger. He was in a much better mood. Xiaoyang, have you gotten in touch with the people outside? The outside that Yang Tao was referring to was the tens of thousands of soldiers and horses stationed nearby. Yan Lin said, I've sent someone to contact them. There should be a response. If we can defeat them before that, we won't have to worry about rumors. Yang Tao crossed his arms and said, Okay, I got it. Chen Su was speechless. Chapter 1592. Who was the angriest about Yan Lin's scheme? Of course it wasn't Jiang Pengji. It was Yang Si, who had been stepped on and used by Yan Lin. Why are you so angry? Look at you. The waxes that the servants spent so much effort on are all gone now. Feng Zhan smiled as he fanned himself with his golden fan. Recently, he had been in high spirits because of the happy occasion. Everyone he saw was pleasing to the eye. Even Yang Si. He was just used by someone. You've tortured Yan Lin enough. Can't you let him retaliate once in a while? You're so petty. Yang Si stopped pacing and glared at him. It's not that simple. Does Yan Lin think I'm a 3-year-old? Even though it was an impromptu plan, Yan Lin's plan was flawless. Yang Si couldn't ignore the bigger picture even if he had doubts. A few days later, the situation became clear. Yang Si's suspicions were confirmed. He had indeed been set up. Who was the one who set him up? He didn't even have to think to know the person's name. Yan Lin had set up this trap. Yang Tao and Yan Lin were the ones who benefited in the end, but Yang Si was the one who suffered. Why did he say that? It was because Yang Si had sent messengers to deliver the news that Yang Tao was suspected of mutiny. As the Lord, Jiang Pengji made the wrong judgment and misunderstood Yang Tao. Even though she sent messengers to correct the news 2 days later, the Lord already knew what she needed to know. Normally, she would only think that Yang Si was incompetent. She wouldn't be angry at Yan Lin's ingenious plan. Yang Si had no choice but to swallow the loss. Even though it wasn't Yan Lin's main purpose, he had indeed been caught in the crossfire. If he had been a petty person, he would have hated Yan Lin for the rest of his life. You don't have to be so angry. Let's wait and see how the Lord reacts. Feng Zhan was happy to watch the drama unfold. Yang Si had been the one watching Yan Lin set him up. Now that the tables had turned, it was finally Feng Zhan's turn to watch Yang Si get set up. He was delighted. You followed her for 10 years. You know what kind of person she is. She might have seen through Yan Lin's plan. Don't worry. It would have been better if Feng Zhan hadn't said anything. Now that he said it, Yang Si felt even more annoyed. He was a member of the Lord's Brain Trust. He had been tricked by Yan Lin, but the Lord had seen through his plan. What did this mean? This meant that his advantage as a strategist was not as good as his Lord's. Then what use did his Lord have for him? Yang Si said angrily, I don't hate Yan Xiaoyang anymore. No matter how I think about it, Feng Zisher's mouth is still the most detestable. Feng Zhen closed his gold-sprinkled fan, spread his arms, and shrugged his shoulders. He looked like he was saying, "What can you do to me?" Yangtze. No, his stomach hurts. When he thought about how he still had to work with Feng Zhen and Yan Lin for decades to come, he felt like he had nothing left to live for. Yang Xixing was not the only one who felt hopeless. The Nanqing soldiers who led the attack were also so depressed that they wanted to vomit blood. They secretly cursed Yan Lin more than once. They had agreed to work together from the inside and outside, but in the end, the enemy came. The city gate was filled with archers who were ready for battle, and they were stunned in a single move. They didn't know the inside story, but when they saw the situation, they knew it was a trap. Logically speaking, they should have retreated as soon as possible to ensure their safety, but they didn't. This was all thanks to Yan Lin's ability to lie through his teeth. He said that Yang Tao's tens of thousands of old subordinates had long been transferred away by the petty Yangtze. Now, there were only tens of thousands of old, weak, sick, and disabled people in the city. The terrain was easy to attack, but difficult to defend. The Nanqing soldiers were coaxed by Yan Lin, and they tried to attack. The soldiers on the city wall were indeed veterans, but they worked well together. On the first day, they barely managed to defend the city. On the second day, they managed to defend the city by a narrow margin. The Nanqing soldiers were furious when they saw this. Just as they were about to retreat, Yan Lin sent another message. He said that he had received a secret report that a batch of provisions would arrive at midnight, and that the city was only a transit station. The Nanqing soldiers didn't believe him, but that night, they received news that many covered ships carrying provisions were entering the city by water. Chen Su didn't know that Yan Lin was so good at lying. The Nanqing soldiers knew that it was a trap, but they still jumped into it. At first, it was Yan Lin who coaxed them, but later, he was really angry. He was determined to take down the city. A few days before Jiang Pengji arrived with her troops, the self-directed drama finally came to an end. The people who suffered the most were not Yangtze or Yan Lin, but the Nanqing soldiers who were kept in the dark. No matter how many people they brought over, they were all killed. Yangtze sent people to search for evidence, but he didn't expect Yan Lin to be so cautious that he didn't leave any evidence. Even if there were letters, they were destroyed. Yangtze didn't have any witnesses or material evidence, so he couldn't accuse Yan Lin of plotting this farce. "You're so calculative." Yangtze gritted his teeth and muttered. He was furious. If it wasn't for the fact that he couldn't beat Yan Lin, he would have taught him a lesson. Was Yangtze someone who could be tricked by anyone? Yan Lin stared at him with his pure and righteous eyes and asked, "Messenger Yang, can you explain why the soldiers who were watching us didn't come to help when the Nanqing soldiers were at the city gate? Did they not receive the news, or did someone instruct them to delay the time?" Yangtze sucked in a breath of cold air and ground his molars rhythmically. Yan Lin was a black-hearted man. He was the one who suppressed the news, detained the spies, and misled the army supervisor. How could he have the cheek to accuse Yangtze of holding a grudge and delaying the reinforcements? Not to mention Yangtze, even if Wei Ci were to be accused of this, Wei Ci would not be able to bear it. Yan Lin hadn't fully pledged himself to the Lord yet, and he was already making enemies? Yangtze sneered and said, "You and I both know the inside story. Don't pretend to be innocent and pitiful." Yan Lin blinked innocently, as if he didn't understand Yangtze's hint. When the two of them met, the atmosphere was like firecrackers. Yang Tao was confused. When Yangtze walked over, Yang Tao asked his friend, "Xiaoyang, didn't you have a good chat with Yang Jingrong? Why are you?" When Yang Tao decided to surrender, Yangtze was the messenger to deal with the situation. He also brought Yan Lin along. He had always thought that Yan Lin and Yangtze were scholars who appreciated each other. He didn't expect that they would become enemies this time. Yan Lin smiled and said, "It's just a small conflict. We can solve it by apologizing in person." "Zhengzi, don't worry." "How can I not worry? I heard that Yangtze is very—" Yang Tao swallowed the word back down his throat. Everyone knew that Yangtze held a grudge. Putting everything else aside, when Yangtze kicked the First Lord, Prince Changsho, he almost caused him to bleed. He was a ruthless person. Yan Lin said, "It doesn't matter. He can't touch me unless he has something that will kill me. So what if he holds a grudge?" Chapter 1593. Fortunately, Yang Si was not a roundworm in Yan Lin's stomach. Otherwise, if he knew what Yan Lin was thinking, he would probably explode in anger. What did Yan Xiaoyang mean? What did he mean by, "I'm good at pacifying, but I don't believe I can't handle Yang Si"? Did he think he was a human or a dog? How could he use the word pacify? Because they didn't know, the two of them could get along peacefully and didn't get into a lawsuit. Feng Zhan was addicted to watching the drama. He wanted to join in no matter what. He was happy to see Yang Si being humiliated. Yan Xiaoyang is on the Lord's list. If you want to take revenge on him, remember to take it easy. Feng Zhan was worried that Yang Si would get into some kind of scandal when he grew up. If he didn't get rid of Yan Lin, he might get himself into trouble. Yang Si glared at him and said sarcastically, "Since when did Feng Longzi change? I can't believe you would say something like that. Advise him to take it easy? How could Feng Zhen say that? How shameless could he be? How shameless!" Even without Feng Zhen's warning, Yang Si knew his limits. His lord could not stand betrayal and infighting. She could turn a blind eye to the small conflicts between the people in the tent and turn a blind eye to it. Occasionally, she would even be in the mood to watch the show or interfere. However, if things got out of hand, she would not allow it. The conflict between Yang Si and Yan Lin hadn't escalated to that extent. At most, they would make a few sarcastic remarks. Speaking of conflicts, Yang Si and Han Yu's were more serious than Yan Lin's, but they were still living in harmony. Feng Zhan tapped his folded fan against his palm and rolled his eyes in exasperation. "Yang Jingrong, you heartless girl. Who am I trying to persuade you for? Isn't it for you? When the conflict between you two reaches the Lord, you'll be the one who suffers in the end. If you don't say anything, the Lord will be partial to you. This is called advancing by retreating." Yang Si said sarcastically, "You're pretending to be kind. Who doesn't know what kind of person the famous Feng Longzi is?" The group of little princesses argued with each other every day. They hadn't fallen apart after so many years. They really admired Jiang Pengji's ability to control her subordinates. Jiang Pengji arrived at her destination 3 days earlier than scheduled. Everyone welcomed her in person. They hadn't seen each other for almost a year. Everyone was so jealous that they realized that their lord didn't seem to have changed much. Jiang Pengji dismounted from the horse's back and helped Fu Wang and the others up one by one. She realized that their skin had darkened by several degrees. She almost couldn't recognize them. She laughed and teased, "Did you all go to the coal mine to dig coal?" When Wei Ci, who was following behind her, heard this, his face turned green. Suddenly, he felt his throat itch. He wanted to cough a few times to wake his lord up. Fortunately, Jiang Pengji was reliable. She added another sentence after teasing him. "It's tough on the front lines. My beloved generals, you've all worked hard." Feng Zhen, Yang Si, and the other scholars were still fine. At most, they had darkened by 1 or 2 degrees and looked a little thinner. However, Fu Wang and the other generals had changed a lot. It was as if they were eating soy sauce for dinner. It was not wrong to say that they had crawled out of the coal mine. Wei Ci's worries were unnecessary. Fu Wang and the rest still did not understand their lord's temperament. It was just a few harmless teasing words. Fu Wang said righteously, "It's my duty to expand the territory of the Lord. It's not hard work. This is not a proper occasion. There's no need to be so restrained. It will make people feel uncomfortable." Jiang Pengji was not a vain person. She did not need her subordinates to show their loyalty to her every now and then. Loyalty was not as important as words. She said to Fu Wang as if she was talking about family matters, "This is not the place to talk. Let's settle the soldiers of the 3 armies first. It's not too late to talk about proper matters later." Jiang Pengji had brought 50,000 troops and horses from Zhanjiang Pass this time. The remaining troops were enough to deal with the changes in Zhongzhou. Jiang Pengji did not need to personally settle the soldiers. Feng Zhan and the others would handle it for her. Fu Wang led her to the main city's manor. As soon as they sat down, Jiang Pengji asked Yang Tao about the rebellion. Fu Wang stammered for a while and looked at Yang Si. Yang Si cursed Yan Lin for the 100th time in his heart. He stepped forward to confess to Jiang Pengji and tried his best to defend himself against the accusation of failing to supervise. Jiang Pengji said, "There's no hurry to confess. Tell me what happened first. At first, we received news that there was a rebellion. Then, we said it was a misunderstanding? She was well aware of the situation, but she still had to ask. She did not want to break the rules and create a bad atmosphere. It was one thing for Jiang Pengji to be well aware of the situation, but it was another for her subordinates to hide it from her. Yang Si felt bitter in his mouth. He picked out the key points and hid Yan Lin's scheme. Firstly, there was no witness or material evidence. It was not easy to accuse him. Secondly, Yang Si did not want to bring the conflict to Jiang Pengji. It would be too embarrassing. Personal grudges were personal grudges. He should not disregard public and private interests and take revenge indiscriminately. Jiang Pengji said calmly, "If that's the case, I'll fine you a month's salary. It's a small punishment but a great warning. Do you have any objections?" Yang Si's ears perked up. He knew that he was going to be the scapegoat. He did not expect his lord to feel sorry for him and let him off lightly. "I have no objections. I'm willing to accept the punishment." Yang Si's mood instantly brightened. He said seriously, "I will remember the lesson and will never do it again." What kind of punishment was a month's salary penalty? At most, it was just a show for outsiders. There was no real meaning to it. This showed that his lord was a discerning person. She knew the inside story, but she could not reveal it. For Yang Si, the punishment was not important. The most important thing was how his lord viewed him. As long as his lord knew that he was innocent, everything else could be ignored. In addition, everyone's salary was different from the usual monthly salary. Every month's salary was fixed, but there would be generous rewards and bonuses in July and January. His lord said that this was a reward every 6 months to encourage everyone's enthusiasm for making contributions. This was the bulk of the annual income. Compared to it, the monthly salary was nothing. According to his lord's temperament, she would definitely find an excuse to make it up to him if he was wronged. Yang Si was the one who benefited. The depression he had been feeling for the past few days was finally relieved. He felt refreshed. Jiang Pengji rested for a while. After she had a general understanding of the situation, she washed up and changed into a more formal outfit to meet Yang Tao. Although Yang Tao had surrendered, he was still a feudal lord in name. Jiang Pengji should give him the respect he deserved. How does my lord plan to settle Yang Tao? Wei Ci saw that there was still some moisture around her and her long hair was slightly damp. He took a dry cloth to dry her. How do I settle him? I'll just go with the flow. Jiang Pengji said, "You know my current situation. There are too few capable commanders who can take charge of an area on their own. Yang Tao and Yan Lin have a close relationship. If I don't use Yang Tao, Yan Lin will not truly submit. It's better to take all of them." There were many capable old officials under Yang Tao. Jiang Pengji needed them. After dealing with Yang Tao, it would not be difficult to recruit these people. She could even tolerate Yang Tao, let alone Yang Tao's old subordinates. Chapter 1594. Wei Ci was a cautious and thorough person. He was already prepared for Jiang Pengji's question. Them? A portion of them are the private troops of the aristocratic families. The remaining 70% are the militia that was temporarily recruited. Wei Ci gently wiped her wet hair as he said, "The Nanqing aristocratic families allocated a portion of their troops to Yang Tao to show their support for him. This defection allowed the Nanqing aristocratic families to proceed so smoothly and caused Yang Tao's army to be defeated and trapped. This portion played an important role. Fortunately, there were only slightly more than 3,000 elites. The rest were the militia that was temporarily recruited. They were used to make up the numbers and increase their influence. Otherwise, even if Yang Tao had Yan Lin's support, it would be difficult to defend the city." "Is this true?" Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows slightly and the corners of her lips curled up. If that's the case, Yang Tao's loss was not undeserved. Wei Ci said, "Indeed, it was not undeserved." Jiang Pengji said, "If you rely on someone, the mountain will collapse. If you rely on someone, you will run away. Doesn't he know this? When the Nanqing aristocratic families are of one mind with him and are willing to support him, the sword they lend to him is his. Once they betray him, the borrowed sword will no longer listen to them." It was precisely because some of the troops under Yang Tao's command were lent to him by the Nanqing aristocratic families that when the Nanqing aristocratic families betrayed Yang Tao's foundation collapsed so thoroughly. If not for this incident, even if the Nanqing aristocratic families wanted to bring people to incite Yang Tao's troops, it would not have been done overnight. Yang Tao might even have been able to kill them instead of helplessly choosing to surrender to Jiang Pengji. Historical experience taught people that things that concerned one's life should never be held in the hands of others. If Jiang Pengji was Yang Tao, even if she accepted the aristocratic family's aid and owed them a favor, Jiang Pengji would secretly change the group of people after she made her fortune. Soldiers that were not trained by herself were always separated by a layer. Who knew if their old master would secretly cause trouble? This was the difference between Jiang Pengji and Yang Tao. Wei Ci said coldly, although Yang Tao made some mistakes, and Xueqi is better. Otherwise, how could he persuade so many aristocratic families to defect? What ability does he have? He was just lucky and picked up a loophole. So what if he was born in the Nanqing aristocratic families? In the end, the Nanqing aristocrats favored Yang Tao, who was an outsider. If Yang Tao hadn't suffered such a huge loss at my hands and affected his value in the eyes of the landowning households, would Emir and Xueqi have been able to seize the opportunity to enter? He sent more than 10,000 soldiers to test our strength and defenses. Just this point alone is enough to make him look down on us. Where did these 10,000 soldiers come from? 30% of the troops were originally loaned to Yang Tao by the landowning households, and the remaining 70% were temporarily recruited militia. And Xueqi didn't even have to pay a single cent. Jiang Pengji couldn't help but mock him. She clearly told Wei Ci that she really didn't have a good impression of Xueqi. It was not only because of the other party's character and behavior, but also because he was Wei Ci's previous master in his previous life. Every time she thought of this, she felt uncomfortable all over. Was her family Zixiao someone who could be oppressed by just anyone? Wei Ci advised, "My lord is right, but our military strength has been greatly depleted. We cannot let our guard down against Xueqi." Jiang Pengji fought with the Nye clan and Yang Tao at the same time. Even if she won, the loss of troops and financial resources was astronomical. She had run over to fight Xueqi before she had even recuperated. Even if Xueqi's vitality was also greatly depleted, she couldn't deal with him half-heartedly. She might fail miserably in an easy task. Jiang Pengji said with certainty, "I know this principle. It's better to be safe than sorry." After she finished speaking, she sighed comfortably. She tilted her head and leaned on Wei Ci's shoulder. She closed her eyes and rested. The tip of her nose lingered with a fragrance that belonged solely to Wei Ci. She didn't know what he used to wash his clothes, but Wei Ci's clothes carried a faint sandalwood fragrance all year round. When she sniffed it carefully, it seemed to have an indescribable coolness that had the effect of calming one's heart. Jiang Pengji liked it very much. When she sniffed it more, her mood would calm down. Wei Ci gently dried his long hair. It was probably too comfortable. His eyelids became heavier, and he started to feel sleepy. When Jiang Pengji had enough rest, her long hair, which had been slightly wet, was almost dry. Jiang Pengji took the opportunity to take advantage of him. She uttered free words of love one after another. Wei Ci was also used to her actions. Even if she wrapped herself around him like an octopus, he could still free up his hands to tie up her long hair. "My lord is really becoming more and more childish," Jiang Pengji said. "Zixiao is becoming more and more like a loving father. In the future, he will definitely be good at raising children." Wei Ci was speechless. How could he respond to that? Because she was busy, Jiang Pengji didn't meet Yang Tao that day. Instead, she chose the next day. That night, too many people tossed and turned restlessly because of various reasons. Yang Tao was needless to say. As the person who slept by his side, Yan Shuxian naturally knew her husband's situation, but she could only comfort him silently. "I don't know what will happen tomorrow." Yang Tao's voice carried a rare sense of confusion. He sounded like a child standing at the crossroads, looking around. He sounded a little fragile. Yan Shuxian turned sideways and looked at him. "No matter what the outcome is, I will accompany you. Wherever you go, I will go." Yang Tao scowled at her. "Nonsense. What if your husband goes to see the king of hell?" Yan Shuxian said, "Then I will look for you after I raise the child into an adult." Yang Tao was stunned. He hugged her even more tightly. The couple didn't speak for the whole night. Yan Lin was also restless. Yang Rujia coaxed the child to sleep and found her husband drawing something on the brocade. "This is," Yan Lin said, "the great universal geographical map of some of Nanqing's prefectures. Our army retreated in a hurry, so we didn't bring many things with us." Smart people usually had good memories. Yan Lin was one of them. Even though he didn't have a photographic memory like Yang Si or Shizhong, he was still better than ordinary people. Many confidential documents were read carefully and memorized deeply before being destroyed. Things that were kept in one's mind were the least likely to be stolen and spied on. Yang Tao's surrender was a foregone conclusion. To prevent Jiang Pengji from underestimating him, Yan Lin set up a trap first and then presented her the Great Universal Geographical Map to help her conquer Nanqing. Yang Tao's situation would be much better then. Yang Rujia sighed. "My husband has a lot of plans for my brother," Yan Lin said. "In this world, I only have you and your family. If I can't even protect you, the world will be so lonely and boring." That night, besides the few of them, Xueqi and the others were also distraught. They had heard about Jiang Pengji's arrival in Zhangzhou with her troops. Xueqi looked calm on the surface, but he was extremely agitated. Xueqi had known Jiang Pengji since before she made a name for herself. He had seen her rise from a lowly county magistrate to a lord of a country. Now that she was pointing a butcher's knife at his weakness, it was impossible for Xueqi not to feel pressured, but he couldn't show any fear. When he was distraught, Xueqi went to his confidant for a solution to gain a sense of security. Hua Yuan talked with him for the whole night. They carefully analyzed the advantages and disadvantages of both sides. The candle flame burned throughout the night. Before dawn, someone outside the tent reported that the military counselor Lu Zhang was looking for Xueqi. Xueqi left Hua Yuan's tent and the latter stood up to send him off. Chapter 1595. Lu Zhang found an excuse to send Xueqi away. He no longer hid his disgust for Hua Yuan, and his entire body was filled with wariness. Ever since LV Zhang found out that Hua Yuan had lost his mind, he had secretly read up on many related medical skills and unofficial history stories. Combining his own judgment and his observation of Hua Yuan, LV Zhang felt that Hua Yuan was not only mentally ill, but also very dangerous. He should not be casually approached. Lu Zhang had once gone to Hua Yuan with a sword in hand, but Hua Yuan kept saying that he was Lu Shi, the Duke of Lanting. At first, Lu Zhang thought it was ridiculous, but after a period of close observation, he shuddered. When an ordinary person fell ill, they would at most go crazy and ramble nonsense, saying who they were, as if they were possessed by a spirit. However, Hua Yuan's insanity was more serious than what Lu Zhang knew. He did not ramble or go crazy. Instead, his speech was sharp, and his thoughts were clear. Lu Zhang boldly probed and discovered that every time Hua Yuan fell ill, he would assume a different identity. For example, Hua Yuan's brother, Hua Yuan's wife, his wife's lover, Gulin, Lu Shi. He had never even heard of some of them. They all appeared at different times. At first, Lu Zhang thought that he was possessed by a spirit, but when Hua Yuan said that he was Lu Shi, Lu Zhang knew that the other had gone completely crazy. He seemed clear-headed and rational, but he was actually so crazy that he had lost his sense of self. He had truly imagined himself to be someone else. Because of this, Lu Zhang could not understand his lord's decision. Why would he use a madman who had lost his mind and let this madman teach the young master? Even though the young master was Xueqi's adopted child from a side branch and not his own, Xueqi had injured his body during his early years in exile. It was impossible for him to have children of his own. If there were no accidents, this young master who had been adopted would be the future heir. Xueqi should treat him seriously. Lu Zhang's thoughts were complicated and tangled. He could not figure out the crux of the matter. Before he could solve these puzzles, he discovered something even more horrifying. It was as terrifying as seeing a ghost in broad daylight. One day, he received a letter asking for help from Hua Yuan. There was no mistaking it. It was indeed a letter from Hua Yuan asking for help. The letter was stained with the fragrance of rouge, and the handwriting was extremely gentle. It was obvious that it was written by a woman at a glance. The signature was even more confusing. It was actually written by Hua Yuan's sister-in-law, and every word was filled with tears. Lu Zhang could not hold back his curiosity and activated it. In private, he met Hua Yuan, who was full of femininity. "You wrote this letter to me? Why did you call for help?" Hua Yuan used her sleeve to wipe away the tears at the corners of her eyes. She had a feminine look on her face, and her sitting posture was like a pretty daughter from a humble family. Lu Zhang was not used to seeing this. The man lowered his voice, making it sound a little shrill. He even gave LV Zhang a standard female salute. The moment Hua Yuan spoke, Lu Zhang knew that something was wrong. "My surname is Wei, and my husband's surname is Hua. I married Hua Yuan a few years ago and gave birth to his children. Even if I didn't make any contributions, I still worked hard. Who would have thought that Hua Yuan would go crazy and attack me and my children when the Nanman people were attacking the city? I'm really wronged." Hua Yuan started crying as he spoke. Lu Zhang looked carefully at his actions and expression. He looked like a woman from an aristocratic family who had suffered a lot. Lu Zhang had investigated Hua Yuan and knew that his wife's surname was Wei. They had a son and a daughter. However, he heard that Hua Yuan's wife was dissolute and often took advantage of Hua Yuan's illness to find a lover to spend the night with. Therefore, it was still a question mark as to who the biological father of this pair of children was. Lu Zhang finally understood that Hua Yuan's illness was acting up again. Was he imagining that he was the wife who had been killed by him? "Why are you looking for me? You said that someone wants to kill you. What's going on?" Lu Zhang's heart was especially strong, and his ability to accept things had also increased several times. The person who claimed to be Hua Yuan's wife was crying. Her face was filled with endless horror. She trembled and said, "That person is Lu Shi. Lu Zhang. Military advisor Lu, you must save me. I found out that the man was standing behind me with a saber in his hand." Lu Zhang shuddered involuntarily. He resisted the nausea and pulled his hand back. When Hua Yuan grabbed him with both hands, he realized that the other party's palms were covered in sticky and cold sweat. The feeling was so disgusting that the hair on his arms stood on end. "Madam Wei, it's broad daylight. Don't scare people." There was no one behind Hua Yuan. It was empty, not to mention the knife-wielding Lu Shi. Did people who had lost their minds all behave like this when their illness acted up? As soon as he finished speaking, Hua Yuan's body suddenly convulsed. He let out a scream of pain that sounded like he was on the verge of death. It was loud and sharp, and Lu Zhang was so frightened that his whole body trembled. Lu Zhang could not help but raise his hand to touch his chest. Hua Yuan, who was sitting opposite him, returned to his usual cold and sharp self. "Hua Yuan, do you really not need to see a doctor to look at your brain?" Lu Zhang suggested sincerely. Hua Yuan, who had come online, snorted coldly and strode away with a wave of his sleeve. 2 days later, Lu Zhang received another letter asking for help from Hua Yuan. It was signed by a name that was not unfamiliar to him. Hua Yuan was one of his wife's lovers. He was suspected to be the biological father of their 2 children. "So what if your illness is acting up? Is there a need to imagine that you're the lover of your wife who cheated on you?" Lu Zhang scratched his hair anxiously. He sighed and went to meet up with Hua Yuan. Once again, he saw Hua Yuan kneeling by his feet, crying and hugging his legs. His face was smeared with snot and tears. "Why are you looking for me? Could it be that Lu Shi is also here to kill you?" Lu Zhang was speechless. He felt that if he interacted with Hua Yuan too much, he would become a lunatic sooner or later. The personality who claimed to be Hua Yuan's wife's lover said in horror and fear, "Yes, how did you know? Please save me. I don't want to die. As long as you save me, I'll immediately ask my servant to give you 1,000 taels of silver." "No, 10,000 taels will do." Lu Zhang looked coldly at Hua Yuan, who was crying and throwing a tantrum. His heart was unperturbed and he even felt like laughing. The other party cried again, That Lu Shi, that lunatic has already killed a few people." Lu Zhang was shocked. He asked tentatively, "Who did he kill?" The other party trembled as he named 4 to 5 people. The one who was recently killed was Hua Yuan's wife. "How did Lu Shi kill you?" Lu Zhang asked curiously. The other party said, "I saw it with my own eyes. That lunatic killed people and ate them alive." 8. As soon as he finished speaking, the other party let out a shrill scream. He looked like a dying man with his goldfish eyes wide open. Lu Zheng's hair stood on end as he listened to Hua Yuan. After a while, he saw Hua Yuan, who was lying on the ground, slowly get up and return to his familiar cold self. Wait! Lu Zhang stopped him this time. I know you're crazy, but what's with Lu Shi killing people? Chapter 1596. Lu Zheng asked him, May I ask, who are you now? Hua Yuan said, This body belongs to my younger brother. Who do you think I am? Lu Zheng understood. Hua Yuan was imagining that he was his younger brother who had died young again. You won't be the one asking for help next time, will you? How much money did he owe Hua Yuan in his previous life? No. Hua Yuan's brother said sarcastically, Only those spineless good-for-nothings will ask you for help. Lu Zheng asked again, What do you think will happen to the people killed by Lu Shi? If they're killed, of course they're dead. The other party retorted, What else do you think? Hua Yuan's condition was very serious. In fact, there were more split personalities than the ones Wei Ci knew of. There were many other weaker personalities that had no chance of appearing. These personalities were weak, timid, and had weak abilities. They were no match for the Lu Shi personality. The earlier the split personality appeared, the stronger it was, and the longer it would appear. For example, Hua Yuan's brother and Gulin. The personality, Lu Shi, did not attack these people. Instead, he chose to devour the weaker personalities to strengthen himself and find an opportunity to take over. After all, in this personality's mind, he was the real Lu Shi. However, he was framed and then taken over. In order to take back everything he had, the personality Lu Shi had to have a real body. Getting rid of the other personalities was the first task. Lu Zhang did not understand this, but he vaguely guessed something. He suddenly felt a headache coming on. The so-called Lu Shi, brother, lover, wife, were all fake people that Hua Yuan had imagined when he was sick. In essence, they were all Hua Yuan himself. What a powerful man. Not only did he cheat on himself, he even wanted to kill himself. Impressive. After a while, Lu Zhang received another letter from Hua Yuan, but this time it was not a letter asking for help. Who are you? Lu Zhang looked at Hua Yuan's face. The other party's eyes were sinister and his thin lips were tightly pursed. This was definitely not Hua Yuan himself. It was more like the guy who had almost strangled Lu Zhang to death. Lu Zhang hesitated for a while and asked tentatively, You are Gulin? Gulin was someone who insisted on slaughtering hundreds of thousands of innocent people in Nanman, and even sent people to abort the pregnant women of Nanxing who were captured alive. Lu Zhang hated Hua Yuan even more than Hua Yuan himself. However, when he thought about how Hua Yuan was a lunatic, he felt very conflicted. How innocent were those women and children? They were originally women of Nanxing, but because of the incompetence of the men in this country, foreign invasions had caused them to become sacrifices of war. His entire body was only left with the function of catharsis, lust, and fertility. He was abused by the southern barbarians. After she got pregnant, she was abandoned by the original Nanxing people. Just because they had the blood of the southern barbarian tribe flowing in their veins, they had to beat the children in their wombs and kill them both. Recognizing that the Hua Yuan in front of him was Gulin, he immediately lost the intention to talk. It was already good enough that he didn't pull out his sword and stab this son of a bitch to death. Don't you want to know why I called you here? Lu Zhang didn't want to talk to him, but Gulin took the initiative to talk to him. Lu Zhang sneered. Could it be that Lu Shi wants to kill you as well? Gulin said, Yes, I've been avoiding her for a long time, but I have a premonition that I'll be killed by her in the end. Lu Zheng asked, What does that have to do with me? If Gulin died, it would be very satisfying. At the same time, Lu Zhang would also be able to take revenge for the time when he was almost killed. Gulin sneered. That's Lu Shi. Lu Zhang was puzzled. So what? Gulin said, Lu Shi is a Duke of Dongqing, right? She doesn't have a good impression of your master. After hearing this, Lu Zheng's heart skipped a beat. He finally realized what was wrong. Gulin revealed a mocking smile and said, You've probably realized that I'm Gulin, but also not Gulin. Every split personality would initially be certain of their own identity. When they began to doubt themselves, they wouldn't be far from breaking down. Although Hua Yuan was a lunatic, he had the instinct to protect himself. As more and more split personalities appeared, he would subconsciously try to save himself. For example, he would split into a stronger personality, which could swallow up all the other personalities. When Hua Yuan went to Dongqing and saw Jiang Pengji, the personality in his body trembled in fear under her spiritual aura. Therefore, Hua Yuan's self-preservation could split into Lu Shi. Unexpectedly, this Lu Shi's self-consciousness was stronger and more terrifying than the other personalities. She wanted to take over the main personality. When she swallowed up all the split personalities, she might be able to replace the main personality. When that time came, who would be the most dangerous person? Of course it would be Shui. Lu Zheng said, "Of course I realized it. What's the point of saying this?" Gu Lin said, "Of course it's to ask you for a favor. Pull out your sword and kill me." Lu Zheng was puzzled. His hand that was holding the sword was a little hesitant. Why? Of course it's because I want to end my life with dignity while I'm still conscious. Hua Yuan is a pitiful, sad, and hateful person. It's better to die early than to live. At least it's a relief. Gu Lin sneered. If you don't do it now, you'll regret it sooner or later. With that, Gu Lin turned around and left. In the next few days, Lu Zheng didn't see him again. Not only Gu Lin, but also Hua Yuan's brother, who often appeared, was nowhere to be seen. Instead, he was replaced by the deity Hua Yuan, who was in low spirits and often looked tired. The people that Hua Yuan imagined all had distinct personalities. It wasn't difficult to distinguish them. Compared to the vengeful, cruel and cunning brother, the deity Hua Yuan was gentle and amiable. It was just that he was introverted and a little weak. Lu Zheng asked curiously about Hua Yuan's recent life. The other party's answer shocked Lu Zheng. Hua Yuan said, "Nothing much happened recently. It's just that I'm often awakened by nightmares." Nightmares? What kind of nightmares are they? Hua Yuan smiled weakly and bashfully. It was as if he was embarrassed to be awakened by a nightmare. In the dream, there seemed to be a woman chasing after me with a knife. I was repeatedly forced into a desperate situation. Alas, it's really terrifying. The bad feeling in Lu Zheng's heart grew stronger until he saw traces of Lu Shi in Hua Yuan. When Lu Shi was young, he had studied in Langyi for 3 years. Naturally, Lu Zheng had seen him. The two of them had interacted a lot. When Hua Yuan revealed a wanton smile that was exactly the same as that person's, Lu Zheng knew that the situation was not good. However, this Lu Shi was very skillful. He was the #1 person in Shui's camp and was trusted by Shui. Under the suppression of the other party, Lu Zhang, an old official, was instead being marginalized. He could barely say anything in front of Shui. Lu Zhang almost vomited blood. What did this imposter Lu Shi want to do? When he heard that Lu Shi and Shui talked through the night about the strategic layout of Dongqing, Lu Zhang was in a bad mood. Chapter 1597. Who exactly are you now? Lu Zhang looked at Hua Yuan warily. His expression was solemn, as if he would draw his sword and fight to the death if anything went wrong. Hua Yuan's lips curled into a sarcastic smile. To him, Lu Zheng's wariness was more like the feeble struggle of a stranded fry. Lu Xiaoyin, who do you think I am? Hua Yuan's tone had changed. It was not as gentle as Nanxing Yayin's. It sounded more like someone from Hejian County in Dongqing. Do you really think you're Lu Shi? You're just a figment of Hua Yuan's imagination after he lost his mind. Lu Zhang gritted his teeth and said the words that could provoke Hua Yuan the most. If he allowed this lunatic Hua Yuan to continue jumping around, who knew what trouble he would cause? It was better to let him have his lunchbox as soon as possible. If you're really Lu Shi, why don't you recall your experiences since you were young? After all, it was just a figment of his imagination and not the real person. Many memories were blurry and missing. Hua Yuan could collect Jiang Pengji's life experiences and simulate her personality, behavior, and habits. However, it was impossible for Hua Yuan to know everything about Jiang Pengji's childhood, adolescence, and youth. That was a flaw. As expected, Hua Yuan's expression changed after Lu Zhang said that. Lu Zhang continued to provoke Hua Yuan with his words while guarding against Hua Yuan's sudden attack. You say you're Lu Shi. Do you remember when I was studying in Langya County and we had a drink at Wangshan Pavilion? What did we talk about in that pavilion? Lu Zhang said word by word. You can't answer me because you're not Lu Shi. You're Hua Yuan, from Nanxing Ningzhou. You have parents and an elder brother. Your twin brother died before he could even reach the age of teeth. Your parents contracted an epidemic and passed away before you could reach the age of enlightenment. Your family business was taken away by your uncle and aunt. On the surface, they treated you well, but they secretly used dirty tricks to cripple you. You became a coward and married a slut that they had carefully chosen as your wife. This woman had an affair with someone else and gave birth to a son and a daughter. Because you were too cowardly, you didn't dare to resist. Hua Yuan, this is the real you. The current you is just an illusion. Hua Yuan's original body was a person who was gentle to the point of being weak. He didn't know how to fight back, but he was unwilling to accept the current situation. He didn't want to be bullied and humiliated. Therefore, he split from Hua Yuan's original body, which was vengeful, cunning, and cruel. Gu Lin was somewhat related to Hua Yuan. His life was miserable, but his martial arts were excellent. Hua Yuan sympathized with his experience and envied his ability. Perhaps it was because of this that Gu Lin was split. The remaining personality was more like a bug born from an unstable emotional state. Their existence placed a heavy burden on Hua Yuan. In order to protect himself, Hua Yuan instinctively split off Lu Shi to restrain them. The reason was simple. When Hua Yuan faced Jiang Pengji, his personality was trembling in fear. Who would have thought that this personality would be so dangerous? Not only could it devour the weaker personalities, but it could also threaten the main personality and take over its place. Lu Zhang didn't know the details, but according to his speculations, what he knew was not far from the truth. You're not Lu Shi at all. You're a lunatic who's lost his mind but doesn't know who you are. As soon as Lu Zhang finished speaking, Hua Yuan suddenly jumped up and snatched the sword from his hand. He clutched Lu Zhang's neck with a ferocious look on his face. Do you think I'll believe you just based on your words alone? If you spout nonsense again, I'll kill you. Hua Yuan suppressed his voice and faintly trembled with a hint of madness. It made people's hearts tremble. He panted and said, Of course I'm Lu Shi. As long as I kill the person who impersonated me, I'll be the one and only Lu Shi. Lu Xiaoyin, if you get in my way again, don't blame me for disregarding our friendship as schoolmates. As soon as he finished speaking, Hua Yuan grabbed Lu Zhang's collar and threw him to the side. Lu Zhang lost his footing and grabbed the tent in his confusion. He fell to the ground pathetically. If it wasn't for the fact that the tent had been set up skillfully and was sturdy and stable, Lu Zhang would have knocked him over. Lu Zhang crawled up pathetically, his left hand tightly gripping the sword. He snorted heavily, flicked his sleeves, and left. This matter had to be reported to the Lord. Hua Yuan was now a lunatic who could take someone's life at any time. If she insisted on keeping him alive, Hua Yuan would probably assassinate Xueqi and kill him before Jiang Pengji could lead her troops to attack. If that was really the case, it would be the biggest joke in the world. Lu Zhang's thoughts were not wrong, but Xueqi had already been warned by Hua Yuan. Xueqi didn't take Lu Zhang's worries to heart. Not only did he not take it seriously, but he also wanted to laugh. He had seen what a lunatic looked like. Hua Yuan's thoughts were clear and his abilities were outstanding. How did he look like a lunatic? If all the lunatics in the world were like him, would normal people still have a way out? Lu Zhang didn't know that when Hua Yuan sought refuge with Xueqi, he had voluntarily revealed his background. At that time, it was his blood brother who had come online. The blood brother told Xueqi that he was Hua Yuan's twin brother. Because one of them had died young, they couldn't bear to part with the other, so they shared the same body. The two of them had different personalities and habits. Instead, they were regarded as lunatics who had lost their minds by some unreasonable people. At that time, Xueqi was short of manpower. Lu Zhang had just sought refuge with him. He hadn't figured out Lu Zhang's capabilities, so he had reservations. When Xueqi saw that Hua Yuan had taken the initiative to seek refuge with him, that he was clear-headed, and that he was a talent, he didn't show any signs of insanity, so he believed Hua Yuan's words. All these years, Hua Yuan had kept it a secret very well. And Xueqi also relied on him greatly. He didn't believe any slanderous words of insanity. Lu Zhang was so anxious that blisters formed at the corners of his mouth, but Xueqi remained unmoved. While Lu Zhang was disappointed, he could only find another way to reduce the harm Hua Yuan would cause. For example, he could transfer Hua Yuan away from the young master's side and then think of a way to drive a wedge between Xueqi, the young master, and Hua Yuan apart. However, the first step of this plan was aborted. Xueqi trusted Hua Yuan. Similarly, he didn't think much of this young master who had been adopted. He didn't understand Lu Zheng's painstaking efforts. Instead, he felt that Lu Zhang was trying to stir up trouble. When he thought about what Hua Yuan had done to him, he didn't like Lu Zheng. Lu Zheng wasn't stupid. When his persuasion didn't work, he knew that Xueqi wouldn't change his mind. How infuriating! Lu Zheng returned to his tent. He was so angry that he wanted to smash something to vent his anger. In the end, he held it in. "Sir, why doesn't the Lord believe your words?" Lu Zheng's servant had followed him from Dongqing to Nanxing. He had seen all sorts of ups and downs over the years. The servant couldn't understand why Xueqi, who had always been well-behaved and thirsty for talent, would be like this. This was too different from how Xueqi had looked when he begged Lu Zheng to come out of seclusion. Chapter 1598. Lu Zheng had agreed to Xueqi too hastily. He had wanted to erase Xueqi's pride and bad habits as an aristocrat before agreeing to become an official. An obedient and dependable lord was much better than a fool who liked to think he was smart but was full of problems. In the end, the plan could not keep up with the changes. Firstly, the situation did not allow for further delay. Secondly, Xueqi's acting talent was top-notch. Now, Lu Zheng had tasted the bitter fruit. Ever since the 4 factions of Nanman were destroyed, Xueqi had ambushed the allied armies under the suggestion of Lu Zheng and the others. He had taken over their military forces and territories and had expanded several times over. Too much expansion had caused Xueqi to float up to the sky. The aristocratic bloodline in his bones had started acting up. This was because Hua Yuan spent most of his time giving advice and suggestions, while Lu Zheng was managing the internal affairs of the secular world. They did not have as many opportunities to show their faces as the former. As time passed, Xueqi did not think much of Lu Zheng, who had once assisted him. He even felt that Lu Zheng was an eyesore and dispensable. Lu Zheng's ancestral home was in Dongqing. He had only agreed to become an official because Xueqi had urged him many times. His ancestors were hunters and he was born poor. Hua Yuan's ancestral home was in Nanxing Ningzhou. He was the descendant of a typical aristocratic family. Even though he had experienced hardships and his family business had been taken away by his uncle and aunt, he was still an aristocratic family. Hua Yuan had taken the initiative to side with Xueqi. His thoughts, interests, and standpoint were all highly in line with Xueqi's. For example, slaughtering the innocent people of the 4 factions of Nanman and aborting the Nanman bloodline in a pregnant woman. They had a common enemy and it was easier to resonate with them. On the other hand, Lu Zheng had opposed Xueqi's slaughter of the Nanman captives more than once. Considering their friendship, it was fine once or twice. But Lu Zheng had been an eyesore too many times. How could Xueqi not hold a grudge against him? Lu Zheng knew these principles. But there were some things that he had to do even though he knew it was impossible. If everyone did not even have the courage to speak the truth for the sake of flattery and self-protection, what would be left in this world? The boy servant and Lu Zheng were of one mind. Seeing his teacher's situation, he was rather worried. Seeing this, Lu Zheng said in amusement, "Why are you so worried?" The boy servant said, "I'm just worried that you'll be at a disadvantage." Lu Zheng said, "Where have you been reading all the books I've taught you? Don't you know what it means to use a gentleman for those who know him and a woman for those who like her? If Nduashi treats me as a national scholar, I will certainly repay him as a national scholar. If you treat me like grass, humph." This was Lu Zheng's temperament. In his previous life, he had fought to the death for his former master. In the end, he had cursed Jiang Pengji and jumped off the city wall to resist with his life. That was because his former master was worth risking his life for. Right now, Xueqi and Lu Zheng were not compatible, and Xueqi could not make Lu Zheng risk his life for him. Lu Zheng could only do his part. It would be best if Xueqi was willing to listen to his advice, but if he wasn't willing, then it was up to him whether he wanted to listen or not. The errand boy was stunned. Lu Zhang snapped, "The head on your teacher's neck is very precious."
Oh,
I understand. Seeing that his page boy had gone to work, Lu Zhang felt a sense of helplessness and heaviness in his heart. His brows were still tightly knitted. At that moment, Lu Zhang's mood was a little complicated. In the words of the audience in the streaming room, Xueqi was like an account that he had painstakingly leveled from a whiteboard to the maximum level. He had added equipment to this account, increased his battle level reputation, and bought a cool appearance. In the end, the account had been snatched away by a fellow with the same account. Although Lu Zhang was depressed, he did not have a deep relationship with this account. Naturally, there was no situation where he had to be the owner. At the very most, he would just have to level up another account, or collect a completed main account. On the other side of the conversation, Xueqi's side was in chaos, while Zhang Pengji's side was very harmonious. In order to show her seriousness, Zhang Pengji had spent a lot of effort on her attire. She had been pulled out of her warm bed early in the morning. "If my lord is tired, close your eyes and rest for a while," Wei Xi gently whispered in her ear. Zhang Pengji's eyes were half closed, and she responded vaguely. "Speaking of which, if I were to ascend the throne in the future, would I have to wake up so early to attend court every day? Would it be so tiring?" Wei Xi said, "There are major and regular court meetings. Major court meetings are held every New Year's Day, winter solstice, and Her Majesty's birthday to be worshipped by hundreds of officials in the main hall. Regular court meetings are more casual, and their schedule is more flexible. If my lord feels tired, it's better to set the time a little later." Naturally, they had to be fully armed during the major court meetings. Their attire had to fully display the majesty of the royal family. Regular court meetings were more casual. Their attire was more inclined towards daily life. It was impossible for them to spend an hour or even an hour every day to dress up. How could they have so much time to waste? Zhang Pengji said, "I feel much more at ease after hearing what you said." Wei Xi laughed and said, "My lord is starting to worry about the days after you ascend the throne." Zhang Pengji said with a smile, "Isn't it because I'm afraid that I'll wake up too early and have too little time to pester you?" Wei Xi held it in for a long time before he squeezed out 4 words. "Be careful of your words and actions." Her good mood for the day began with playing with Zixiao. Zhang Pengji slept very soundly last night, but Yang Tao and the others tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep. They endured intermittently until dawn. When the two parties met, Zhang Pengji looked Yang Tao up and down. Once again she confirmed one thing. This was indeed a world that valued appearance. Almost none of the leaders of the feudal vassals were ugly. Their looks were all above average. Yang Tao's looks even exceeded the 90 mark. Didn't they see the group of salted fishes in the live stream who were obsessed with looks? Their eyes had seen thousands of ships, and they had seen all kinds of beauties. But as long as they could truly pick someone, they would definitely be a real beauty. Yang Tao's looks could withstand their nitpicking, which was like using a magnifying glass. He was definitely a natural handsome guy. Yang Tao was good-looking, and the few people behind him also had their own merits. Tudu Feiqiu, TSK, it doesn't seem like an official occasion to accept Yang Tao's surrender. It's more like the streamer is choosing a man. Qing Feng Wang Yue, ha ha ha, now that you put it that way, isn't Beauty Ci the Empress? The salted fishes laughed and laughed, but Zhang Pengji could not be so casual. Back then, she had used the Oath of Alliance to recruit Huang Song, which completely reassured Huang Song and his former subordinates. Now that she was recruiting Yang Tao, she naturally could not be careless. No matter how extravagant one's words were, they could not compare to a black word on a piece of white paper. Today, they said that they had accepted Yang Tao's surrender, but the main topic was still to discuss the contents of the Oath of Alliance. Although Yang Tao was the defeated party, Zhang Pengji did not embarrass or humiliate him. Instead, she showed her sincerity. She even personally thanked Yang Tao for leading the troops to repel the invading Nanqing army and protect the city. She did not mention anything about what Yan Lin and the others had done. Yang Si, who was sitting at the lower seat, was not very happy. But when he remembered that his lord was biased towards him, he did not argue with Yan Lin and the others. Zhang Pengji showed her sincerity, and Yang Tao's side naturally knew what was good for them. Therefore, the atmosphere was quite harmonious. Chapter 1599. Xiaoyang, why do you think Lu Shi suddenly made such a request? Because Jiang Pengji was sincere enough, and Yang Tao didn't cause any trouble, the oath was quickly confirmed. Both parties were very satisfied. Yang Tao's old subordinates were originally worried about their futures, but now they were relieved. Yang Tao didn't feel completely at ease, because he didn't understand Jiang Pengji's request. Did she trust him, or did she want to take the opportunity to kill him? Lord Zhengze, you don't have to worry. Qian Su couldn't call Yang Tao Lord now, even if she hadn't changed her boss. After all, this was Jiang Pengji's territory. It was for Yang Tao's own good, to reduce the possibility of Jiang Pengji suppressing him. Two tigers couldn't live on the same mountain, so Jiang Pengji could be the lord. Qian Su wasn't Yang Tao's guest. After choosing, he chose a respectful title that didn't alienate or overstep. Yang Tao crossed his arms. He didn't find anything wrong with Qian Su's change of title. He sighed. When my father was still here, he said that Lu Shi wasn't a person who could be judged by common sense. Now that I look at it, my father was right. I really don't understand Lu Shi's actions. Xiaoyang, did you see anything? Yang Tao's IQ was slightly higher than that of a normal person, but compared to a strategist who specialized in scheming, he was still a long way off. Anyway, he had a ready-made external brain, and he had a chance to ask for help, so Yang Tao didn't waste his time. Qian Su said, "The oath of alliance was just made. If Lu Shi really had evil intentions, she wouldn't have shown it now. There are many benefits to treating Lord Zhengze well. Not only can you successfully incorporate your old subordinates, but you can also win a good reputation in front of the world." Yang Tao said, "I know this, but I just don't know what she's trying to do." After all, he had been a lord for so many years. Yang Tao had been influenced by what he saw and heard and learned a lot of scheming and strategies. He was not as naive as he was when he was young. However, he could not see through Jiang Pengji's plan to let him have military power after he surrendered. She was so ambitious. Wasn't she afraid that Yang Tao would use his charisma to win over the soldiers and secretly seize military power? Then he would jump out and cause trouble when Jiang Pengji was slacking? Qian Su had a guess in her heart, but she couldn't say it out loud in front of Yang Tao. Yang Tao said, "If you have any guesses, just say them." Do I look like someone who's difficult to talk to? Perhaps it was because he had shed his identity as the Lord. Yang Tao now had an empty title but no real power. He no longer had to maintain his bearing like before, and his words and actions had become casual. He even put his hand on Qian Su's shoulder while withstanding his companion's death ray. Qian Su walked properly, her back was ramrod straight, and her eyes were looking straight ahead. On the other hand, Yang Tao was swaying left and right, as if someone had pulled out his backbone. Qian Su wanted to say something, but Yan Lin spoke for him. "Lu Shi. She probably wants to recruit you." Qian Su heaved a sigh of relief. He had been suppressing this thought in his heart, and it had almost caused him to suffocate. Yang Tao blinked in confusion. He pointed at himself and said, "Didn't I swear an oath of allegiance to her?" "My lord, by swearing an oath of allegiance, you mean that you will be pampered by Lu Shi like Huang Song. You will be a carefree rich man who doesn't care about anything. When Lu Shi ascends to the throne in the future, he will give you an empty title so that your descendants can live in ignorance." Yan Lin snorted coldly. "I'm afraid Lu Shi wants you to become her subordinate. If you completely surrender to her, it's hard to say what will happen in the future. The former was a waste of time, but at least there was a guarantee. To put it bluntly, it was an iron rice bowl where you could eat, drink, and wait for death. The latter still had room for advancement, but the price was that you would have to pay for it by bowing down to your former opponent. In the future, you would have to be twice as afraid of your former opponent. Since ancient times, those who had made great contributions to their lord did not have a good ending. If the person who had made great contributions to their lord and held the military power was their former opponent, the whole clan would not be able to live in peace." Yang Tao finally caught up with their train of thought. He rubbed his chin and said, "Lu Shi really didn't hurt his head these past few days?" Yan Lin said, "Lu Shi probably knew that Xiaoyang wouldn't agree immediately, so he used your familiarity with Nanqing as an excuse to let you follow the army to war. At the same time, he He exposed his own shortcomings to show that there are not many generals in the army who can take on big responsibilities. He asked you to help supervise and train the troops. Rather than saying that he was giving you access to military power, it was more like he was testing you to see if you had any objections to this, so that he could come up with a countermeasure. Yang Tao was stunned. He didn't expect Jiang Pengji to come up with so many tricks for him. He couldn't make up his mind. Then what should I choose? Chen Su sighed. There are pros and cons to this. If you accept it, you won't be as decadent as Huang Song in the future, and your descendants won't be restricted when they become officials. But there are also cons. Once Lu Shi becomes suspicious, you and your clan will be in danger. Jiang Pengji appeared to be open-minded at the moment, but who knew what would happen in the future? People change. Otherwise, why would there be so many shitty things like getting rid of the donkey when it was no longer of use? Many feudal lords and their officials had a honeymoon period of intense affection. After that period, there would be no shortage of killing acquaintances. It can't be, right? Yang Tao looked hesitant. He said, what was the relationship between Lu Shi and Huang Song in the past? They drank together and went to brothels. Although Lu Shi and I interacted, we didn't have a friendship when we were young. Why didn't she give Huang Song a chance? It doesn't sound reliable. Yan Lin sneered. Huang Song and Zhengze are different. Lu Shi isn't a nepotistic person. He's very cold and clear-headed. To put it nicely, it was clear-headed and rational. To put it bluntly, it was mercenary. Huang Song couldn't bring her many benefits, so why would she let Huang Song, a hidden danger, be in power? On the contrary, many of Yang Tao's former subordinates were left behind by Yang Jian. They had rich battle experience and were adept at the art of war. They came from a legitimate family of generals. Yang Tao's former subordinates would be more loyal to Jiang Pengji for the sake of the two previous lords. Lu Shi has a lot of generals under his command, but there aren't many who come from a legitimate family of generals. In the past, they fought on a small scale, so this flaw wasn't obvious. Now that they've conquered all of Dongqing, Nanqing only has Shui. They can't do anything alone, and Zhongzhou is half destroyed. They probably won't be able to stop her ambition. Now that she's expanded, the unorthodox ways she used to be won't be enough. Naturally, she has to find another way to make up for her shortcomings. Yan Lin was the cleverest one. He clearly saw Jiang Pengji's intention in recruiting Yang Tao. Yang Tao suddenly understood. He said, I'm afraid I have to think about it. Chapter 1600. Yang Tao, on the other hand, didn't find it unacceptable. He had an empty title, and it was safe for his family to eat, drink, and wait for death. But if anything happened, he would still be at the mercy of others. Empty titles were not as safe as real power. If he was afraid of overdoing things, he could be a little more mediocre in the future. His military rank was neither too high nor too low. It was still safe. Anyway, even if he had real power, Jiang Pengji still had to give him the empty title. He had 2 layers of protection. Most importantly, he was used to fighting and fighting. It would be hard for him to return to peace. Yang Tao was not someone who could sit still. Yan Lin sighed. Think about it slowly, Zhengze. Whether you agree or not, remember to drag it out a little longer. Keep him in suspense. Yang Tao was dumbfounded. Keep Lu Shi in suspense? Yan Lin said, whether it's a man or a woman, those who get what they want too easily don't know how to cherish it. Keeping him in suspense was not only to let him know how to cherish it, but it was also to increase his own value. Yan Lin knew Yang Tao's temperament better than anyone else. To put it bluntly, he knew what kind of *T he was about to poop when Yang Tao stuck out his butt. He was decisive and decisive. Once he made a decision, he would not hesitate. Yan Lin was teaching him to be reserved and to put on airs. After all, if he didn't put on airs now, he might not have the chance to do so in the future. Yang Tao's expression was complicated. I have a family. Yan Lin's words were too ambiguous. Jiang Pengji was a good-looking woman. She was charming, powerful, and powerful. Even though humans had gotten rid of the stupidity of beasts, there were still some similarities. When it came to choosing a mate, capable males were favored by females. Regardless of gender, Powerful men were indeed more attractive to the opposite sex. There were many gossips among the people about this female lord and the officials around her. It was just like when a man was surrounded by female officials. The people would think that there was some kind of indecent relationship between them. Yan Lin glanced at Yang Tao's face and let out a rare snort. Xiaoyang, why are you looking at me like that? Yan Lin smiled. Zhangzi is beautiful, but you are not the most beautiful woman in the world. That Lanting Duke will not covet your beauty. Yang Tao had always been very confident in his face. He said, how is it not stunning? Yan Lin asked him, what do you think about Lu Shi's man, Wei Ci? Chen Su and Yang Tao were stunned. Why did the topic change to Wei Ci? Chen Su recalled Wei Ci's face and heard Yang Tao say, a refined gentleman, outstanding. Yan Lin asked, what does he look like? He was a refined gentleman who stood out from the crowd. What people praised was his moral conduct, but Yan Lin asked about his face. Yang Tao racked his brains for a long time. He felt that any word that was used to describe Wei Ci would seem slightly vulgar. In the end he said, Sha is he, Xiaoyang said. Chen Su couldn't restrain her laughter and almost couldn't hold it in. Yang Yen and Yen was said, comma. And Wei was Yang of and of Yang of things. Of Yang. Of. Yang Tao was an adult. How could he not answer that question? He said straightforwardly, of course it's the lovers' necks going to hell together. It was as if someone was strangling him and muffling his voice. Chen Su also stopped. The two of them looked at Yan Lin in shock. Yang Tao said, I remember Lu Shi has many accessories. Why did you notice this? Chen Su understood. When they first met, Yan Lin pointed out the mistakes in his accessories. He was so observant that it seemed like he had OCD. Accessories weren't something that could be worn casually. What kind of accessories would be worn according to one's status, occasion, and age? These were all things that had to be paid attention to. If he made a mistake, he would be ridiculed behind his back for not knowing etiquette. No matter how casual Jiang Pengji was, she was still a lord. Today was the day she and Yang Tao made their vows. She couldn't make a mistake on such a small detail. If she made a mistake, it was not because she didn't care, but because the three of them looked at each other. They had mixed feelings. Yan Lin looked down and murmured, keep it to yourself. Yang Tao said, I know. I won't tell anyone. He used to think that the gossips spread by the ignorant people were slandering her. He didn't expect Jiang Pengji to really have an affair with the officials. Yan Lin added, don't think too much. The two of them might really be in love. If she, as the lord, had fooled around with the officials, it wouldn't have come to this. He could feel the atmosphere of a group of forces. Yan Lin's first impression of Jiang Pengji was that she was upright. He also realized that other than Wei Ci, who seemed to be in a relationship with Jiang Pengji, the others didn't treat their lord as a woman. Yang Tao was the most obedient. He did whatever his friends said. Soon, it was lunchtime. Jiang Pengji invited Yang Tao and the others to eat with her. The various delicacies were delicious. Zhang Zhou had a lot of seafood. Under the guidance of salted fish in the streaming room, Jiang Pengji expanded her menu. Yang Tao and the others grew up near the water. They didn't know that common seafood, such as scallops and oysters, could be cooked in such a way. Before Jiang Pengji came, the culinary skills of this era were limited to plain water. There were few seasonings, and the most they could do was add salt. The gentry ate meticulously, but they didn't have many ways to cook. No matter how good the ingredients were, the taste of the food was limited. Yang Tao finally understood where Jiang Pengji's Zhangzhai restaurant could go. The food was indeed delicious. Therefore, Yang Tao asked Jiang Pengji for a chef. Xiaoyang said that Jiang Pengji needed his help. It was okay for him to be a little willful. As expected, Jiang Pengji agreed. She even asked for the second-best chef in the kitchen. Yang Xi's eyes turned red with jealousy. He had coveted his lord's chef for so many years. His lord had never thought of rewarding him. Yang Tao had just arrived and he wanted to take it. Seeing Yang Xi's angry expression, Wei Ci smiled and passed him a plate of roasted oysters that he hadn't touched. Unexpectedly, Yang Si rolled his eyes at Wei Si after taking it. Wei Si understood immediately. He whispered, "When the war is over, I'll give you one of the chefs in my manor." Yang Si was satisfied. "This is what you said. Don't go back on your word." The cooking skills of the chefs in Wei Si's manor weren't worse than that of the lords. It was just that Wei Si needed to recuperate and eat more carefully. These chefs were specially transferred over by the lord. If he couldn't ask the lord for help, he could take advantage of Wei Si. It was fine as long as he could satisfy his tongue. Wei Si smiled. "You can't eat too much of it." Seeing that Yang Si liked to eat oysters, Wei Si kindly added. Yang Si asked, "Why?" Wei Si said, "It strengthens yang and nourishes yin." Chapter 16:01. Strengthening yang and nourishing yin? Yang Si couldn't eat at this moment, but he was greedy if he didn't eat. He was in a dilemma for a moment. Finally, he placed the chopsticks neatly and lowered his voice to Wei Si's ear. "Wei Zixiao, are you not sincere?" Did he look like the kind of man who needed to strengthen yang and nourish yin? Men could say anything except no. Yang Si suspected that Wei Si was deliberately disgusting him. Wei Si blinked innocently and said with a puzzled expression, "What does Jingrong mean?" "I'm just reminding you that this is delicious, but you shouldn't eat too much." Jingrong's temperament is to eat delicious food until you're sick of it. If something goes wrong, it'll be too late to remind you. Yang Si said, "How many years have we known each other? Don't pretend to be innocent in front of me. You can deceive people who don't know, but you can't deceive me." Wei Si's network was really wide. Except for a few exceptions, most of Jiang Pengji's subordinates had a personal relationship with him. For example, Feng Zhan and Yang Si walked right into the trap because of his introduction. It was precisely because they had a good personal relationship that they understood each other particularly well. Yang Si knew that if Wei Si's face was not too deceptive and he looked too righteous, how could no one see through his true nature? Wei Si smiled and said, "If you don't eat it, don't waste it." He pretended to take the stack of oysters back, but Yang Si was one step faster and stopped him. "How can you take back what you've given away? Who said I'm not eating it?" Yang Si rolled his eyes and said to Wei Si with a smile, "Zixiao, on the other hand, needs more nourishment. You also know the current situation. If there's that would be the best." Wei Si took a sip of tea and lowered his eyelids. His long and thick eyelashes cast a fan-shaped shadow. Jiang Pengji's hearing was excellent. She had always been observant and attentive, multitasking. How could she miss the movements on Wei Si's side? She secretly rubbed the accessory hanging from her waist with her fingers. The corners of her lips curled slightly, as if there was a layer of gentle ripples in her eyes. No wonder so many salted fish in the streaming room said they wanted to swing on his eyelashes. She also wanted to set fire to his heart. Wei Si said in a low voice, "There's no hurry. Why are you panicking?" Yang Si almost choked. He said angrily, "You're older than the girl by 6 or 7 years. If you wait any longer, will you still be able to give birth?" After all, the relationship between Wei Si and Jiang Pengji was not made public. A few smart people were well aware of it and had reached a tacit understanding, but more people were still kept in the dark by the two of them. The Lord did not say to make it public, so this matter could not be made public. Yang Si had to be careful when he spoke. Wei Si sneered, "Jingrong is older than me by 6 or 7 years. In other words, if Yang Si could make an iron tree blossom, why couldn't he, who was younger and had more self-discipline, do the same?" This group of people loved to worry for nothing. Yang Si really wanted to hammer Wei Si. He was supposed to be his best friend, but in the end, he was a plastic product. Could he still have some love? Delicacies were constantly being served, and no one was in the mood to discuss business. It was more important to fill their stomachs. Yang Si decisively abandoned Wei Si, who had given him a heart attack, and threw himself into the arms of delicious food. His appetite alone was equivalent to that of 2 Wei Sis. Of course, the one who had the best appetite was his lord. She ate as much as 7 or 8 burly men. Yang Tao, who claimed to be a big eater, was stunned. He had seen people who could eat a lot, but he had never seen anyone who could eat so much. After the banquet, Yang Tao could not help but complain to Yan Lin. Now I know why she wants to conquer the world. Yang Tao crossed his arms in front of his chest and said while nodding. Yan Lin thought that his friend had some brilliant idea. Why? No one can afford to feed her. She can eat too much, Yang Tao said. If she doesn't fight for it, she will starve to death in the backyard. Yan Lin was speechless. If it were not for the people around them, he would have taken out his swords and taught Yang Tao a lesson on how to be careful with his words and actions. Little did he know that Zhang Pengji had already heard him. After all, her hearing was unreasonably good. Did something good happen, my lord? Wei Ci was about to help her sort out the official business, but he did not expect his lord to suddenly laugh. It was a helpless and doting smile. Zhang Pengji smiled and said, "Nothing good, but Yang Tao is really a wonderful person. Yan Lin must have worked hard for his personality." Wei Ci was at a loss until Zhang Pengji repeated Yang Tao's words in a low voice. "He's a treasure boy. It's so funny." Zhang Pengji did not mind Yang Tao's sarcasm at all. Instead, she thought that he was quite cute. He was silly and adorable, just like Li Yun and the others in the past. She cared more about her frog and flirted with him at all times. This time was no exception. She said, "Zixiao, can you afford to feed me? Even if I have to eat 7 or 8 men's meals in one meal." Wei Ci sighed and said, "My monthly salary is paid by you, my lord." Zhang Pengji said, "Zixiao, your answer is so straightforward. How do you expect me to continue flirting with you?" Wei Ci said, "My lord, it's time to deal with official business. I don't want to be a blue-faced troublemaker and let you hold up your work." Zhang Pengji poked his nose and said in annoyance, "Unromantic." Wei Ci said, "Unromantic Wei Zixiao sincerely asks my lord to stop sneaking out this afternoon and focus on official business. Is that okay?" Zhang Pengji was speechless. How was this a lover? It was obvious that she had found herself a housekeeping robot. Moreover, she was using both hard and soft tactics, as well as seducing. Because of Wei Ci's supervision, Zhang Pengji's plan to sneak out and be a hands-off boss was once again foiled. The 5 million idle viewers could only watch Zhang Pengji squat in the government office and compete with piles of documents. They drank tea and ate melon seeds. They smiled at Zhang Pengji's desperate look. Blow explode little chili. The streamer uses her personal experience to tell us a truth. You can't find a man who is full of career ambitions when you fall in love, because the other party will ignore your flirting and seduction. He only wants you to work hard for your career with him. Wei Ci helped Zhang Pengji tidy up. When he lowered his head, he saw that the accessories on his waist were a little strange. He took off an accessory and frowned slightly because it belonged to his lord. His own piece ran to his lord's waist. "What's wrong?" Zhang Pengji looked up at him and saw what he was holding in his hand. She said, "I put you on my body. Are you touched?" Wei Ci couldn't help but hold his forehead. He had an indescribable expression. Zhang Pengji asked him, "What's wrong?" Wei Ci said, "My lord, do you know about Yan Lin's experience?" Zhang Pengji said, "I've heard a little about it." Wei Ci said, "In my previous life, Yan Lin once reported an official because he was dressed inappropriately. The two became enemies because of that." Zhang Pengji said, "Dressed inappropriately? How so? Don't tell me you're doing a uniform play?" Chapter 1602. Zhang Pengji rubbed her chin and said, "Are you trying to say Yan Lin probably found out about our relationship? That I slept with my subordinate?" Wei Ci said, "Most likely they won't think too well." Zhang Pengji said, "What's wrong with that? I don't plan to sleep with him or Yang Tao, who he treats as his precious eyeball." Wei Ci was speechless. His lord did not care about her reputation at all. Wei Ci, who valued his lord's reputation, was a little tired. Zhang Pengji said, "You don't have to change it back. It's not like I can't be seen." Since she did not care, it was useless for Wei Ci to persist. He was worried, but at the same time, he was secretly happy that he despised her. After a few days, Yang Tao agreed to Zhang Pengji's request. Zhang Pengji also gave him enough trust to appease his old officials. At the same time, Jiang Pengji also sent a large number of scouts to find out the situation under Xueqi's rule. Only by knowing oneself and the enemy could one win 100 battles. Days passed. In the blink of an eye, 10 days had passed. Jiang Pengji was ready to slack when Wei Ci was not paying attention. She heard salted fish cheering in the live stream as soon as she got up. She opened the bullet screen and saw that it was the day of the birth of the lucky emperor. She glanced at it and was about to close it. She did not expect a gorgeous face to appear on the screen. Even Jiang Pengji, who was very strict about appearance, had to admit that the face was indeed beautiful. Of course, the owner of the face was not the body of the salted fish who had transmigrated. The body of the salted fish was similar to that of a guard. His appearance was of a standard that could not be found in a crowd. It seems that there is no danger. Jiang Pengji made a simple assessment of the situation and went out to slack. She did not expect that the group of people was coming for her. Sigh, it is indeed not a good identity to transmigrate. The lucky emperor felt pain all over his body. The straw sandals on the soles of his feet had long been worn out and there were many bloody blisters. If not for the two goddess-like figures sitting under the shade of a tree not far away, he would not have been able to sit still. To save his life, the lucky emperor chose the principle of talking less and doing more. He took off the straw sandals hanging on his shoulders and put them on while listening to the situation. Perhaps because there were too many lucky emperors, the crowd also wanted to compete. No matter what character he became, he couldn't be the unlucky one who was forced to end his transmigration before his time was up. Therefore, lucky emperor endured the pain in his feet and body. After listening for a long time, he finally found out some information. This group of 22 people were not people from Nanxing, Zhongzhou, or Dongqing. They were people from Xichang, who rarely appeared. Xichang? I don't have any impression of him. What surprised Lucky Emperor and Salted Fish even more was that the two people sitting under the shade of the tree, dressed in simple clothes, were actually princes and princesses. He didn't hear wrongly. She was from the royal family, a prince and a concubine. Listening to their conversation, they seemed to be twin siblings from the same mother. However, what were the princes and princesses of Xichang doing in Dongqing? Luck King instantly came up with a conspiracy theory. Even though he had a big imagination, it was still not as big as reality. The purpose of their visit was unexpected. They were sent by the Xichang royal family to make peace through marriage. That's right, it's a marriage. Luck King and the 5 million salted fish were all speechless. What kind of royal marriage was this? Including the princes and princesses, there were only 22 people in the group. Apart from these two members of the royal family who were dressed rather cleanly, but the fabric had faded from starching, the rest were unkempt and dirty. Their clothes were tattered, and they were sallow and emaciated. Even if they were said to be refugees, some people would believe them. Could it be that they were robbed on the way to make peace through marriage? In Luck King's understanding, the royal family was the representation of wealth, power, and influence. Their reputation would never be shabby. These two princes and princesses were in such a miserable state. They most likely met with misfortune along the way. Little did they know that they were just that poor. The group rested for a while before getting up again. Luck King watched as a few guards forced and threatened them to borrow a few fishing boats from the nearby fishermen. The 22 people squeezed onto the boat. Looking at the swaying boat and the rippling surface of the water, Luck King secretly hugged himself tightly. Because this body was a guard, his hearing was good. He could vaguely hear the conversation between the royal siblings coming from the cabin. Apart from the useless business compliments, the rest of the content was more explosive. For example, the prince's marriage partner was actually their streamer. The salted fishes were stunned. They all went to make fun of Jiang Pengji. The bullet screen completely filled her field of vision. Jiang Pengji was half lying by the river, fishing. The fish basket beside her was empty. Not to mention fish, there was not even a fish scale. The salted fishes did not understand. Jiang Pengji had never caught any fish in so many years. Why did she not get tired of fishing? Jiang Pengji closed her eyes and rested while fishing. The fishing rod was sandwiched between her head and shoulder. She supported the side of her head with her right hand, and the bamboo hat on her head covered most of her face. When she heard the commotion and looked at the bullet screen, she found that the screen was full of scum, and my heart aches for Zixiao. Jiang Pengji was speechless. What happened? She followed the bullet screen to look at the screen of Luck King's son's streaming room. She found that the bullet screen was also full of all kinds of comments. Jiang Pengji rubbed her brows. She still did not understand what had happened. After the salted fish's heated explanation, Jiang Pengji then understood that a group of people claimed to be the royal family of Xichang and wanted to make a marriage alliance with her. What the hell is this? When it was close to sunset, Jiang Pengji carried the empty fish basket back. She did not expect to be caught red-handed by the people who were waiting for her. Cough, you're all here. Did something big happen? Feng Zhan and the others looked at each other. Finally, they chose Wei Ci to hand over the diplomatic letter. Jiang Pengji took the old, second-hand bamboo scroll, opened it, and read it quickly. Excluding all kinds of useless greetings and airs, the core meaning was that the Emperor of Xichang intended to bestow his son to Jiang Pengji as a concubine in order to maintain good relations between the two countries. At the same time, he hinted at how good his son was. He hoped that his future daughter-in-law would lend him troops to help him quell the war in Xichang. Then, Xichang and Dongqing would help each other and establish eternal diplomatic relations. The other party also promised all kinds of benefits. As long as Jiang Pengji lent him troops and he conquered Xichang, all these benefits would be fulfilled. Not to mention that Dongqing and Xichang were in the east and west, separated by Zhongzhou. How could they help each other? She could not understand the reason why they would bestow their son to Jiang Pengji as a concubine. It was said that the prince was the second son of the empress. Liar! Jiang Pengji looked at it again and came to such a conclusion. Wei Ci smiled bitterly and said, "If it's a liar, we dare not present it to you." So it's true? It's not that I don't believe it. The problem is that this thing is very fake. Jiang Pengji revealed a trace of astonishment. Which country's emperor would give away the legitimate son of the empress in exchange for troops? Although Xichang is the weakest among the 5 countries, it shouldn't be in such dire straits. Wei Ci said, "Maybe you'll understand when you meet him personally." Chapter 1603. Regardless of whether it was Jiang Pengji or the 5 million idle fish in the streaming room, in their inherent impression, the royal family would not be stingy with their image no matter how poor they were. After all, the royal family could not afford to lose face. Even if their faces were swollen, they would still have to pretend to be fat. However, the envoy from Xichang country had taught them a lesson. Regardless of their intentions for coming, since they were the envoy of a country, Jiang Pengji could not neglect them. Before meeting people, she had to take a bath and change her clothes. She could not possibly meet people in a sackcloth. Those who did not know better would think that she was a fisherwoman from some fishing village. Jiang Pengji closed the view of the main streaming room and went to wash up. The idle fish were bored, so they gathered in Oh Huang's streaming room to chat and find out about the enemy situation. They were all loyal fans of the Pengci CP. They would not allow a stranger to come between them. Naturally, Oh Huang thought so too. He did not have a good impression of the 2 descendants of the royal family. Although the 2 of them were in dire straits, their attitudes were very proper, as if they were high and mighty nobles. In the eyes of those who liked them, they might praise them for not breaking their pride despite falling into the dust, saying that they did not bring shame to the royal family. In the eyes of those who did not like them, this was pretentious. They were not even as good as the people of Wanzhou. How could they pretend to be the descendants of the royal family? All of you can leave. There is no need for you to serve here. The second prince looked at the attire in the room, and then at the appearance of his entourage. He was displeased, but at the same time, he felt a little inferior. The servants and guards they brought were not presentable. Not to mention that they were covered in dirt. Even the ordinary refugees were cleaner than them. The guards were even more so. The straw sandals on their feet were worn out, but they were not willing to change them. Their feet were covered in blood and their toes were slightly deformed. Their image was very different from that of the envoy from Xichang country. Not only did they not bring glory to the faces of the 2 favored sons of heaven, but they also exposed their shortcomings. Their faces were burning hot. They had lost face in front of their future wives and were looked down upon. The servants responded in a daze. Only the European emperor sneered in his heart. The streamer is such a good person. Lucky Emperor and the other guards were arranged to rest in the servants' quarters. Someone even prepared clean clothes, hot water, and food for them. Lucky Emperor did not know how long it had been since he was full. When Lucky Emperor smelled the aroma of food, his stomach began to rumble. His hands seemed to be out of his control, and he ate a big bowl of rice as fast as he could. The dishes on the dining table were all gone. After finishing them, he still felt that there was space in his stomach. He could eat another portion. "I'm starving." At the same time, the Xichang prince and the empress concubine were also treated as honored guests. The maidservant brought in a few plates with a set of neatly folded women's clothes and accessories. Even though it wasn't made according to the imperial family specifications, it was still something that only the daughters of aristocratic families had the right to wear. The empress concubine looked as cold as ice, but her eyes constantly swept over the plates. Her gaze revealed her love and determination to win. When she was born, the Xichang imperial family was not yet in such dire straits. She also enjoyed 7 or 8 years of wealth and glory. Her food, clothing and housing were all the best in the world. As the most favored empress concubine, her father would spend tens of thousands of taels of silver to celebrate her birthday. Whatever she wanted, her father would give it to her. However, these good days did not last for long. A few years ago, Xichang country was torn apart. The various factions fought and killed each other. Every few days, there would be an uprising. The number of feudal lords with names also increased day by day. The Xichang imperial family was overthrown in one fell swoop. Their family, along with a few loyal ministers, were forced to flee in all directions. Their lives became worse and worse. They were so poor that they had to eat tree bark. No one knew that in order to gather the expenses for these 20 people's visit, those old ministers even took out their coffins. Her father even reluctantly sold his infertile concubines to the red light district to earn money. Thinking of her father and mother's lives, and then looking at the brocade clothes and jewelry that the servants and maids brought over, the empress concubine felt all sorts of emotions churn in her chest. She had long reached marriageable age. Logically speaking, she should be preparing for marriage. However, the current imperial family did not even have the capital to make a comeback. Who could she marry? Could it be that she had to marry those Xichang rebels who called themselves feudal lords in exchange for some gold and silver? By chance, she had heard of her father's plans from her mother. Her mind had become active. She also wanted to go through a marriage alliance. Empress Xichang said, "You are a woman, and so is Lu Shi. How can you compare to your second brother? I heard that Lu Shi has no children and doesn't even have a servant by his side. Who knows if he's ill or if he has a penchant for mirrors?" said the empress concubine. In the chaos of the 16 kingdoms, weren't there a pair of siblings who monopolized the emperor's favor? Taking a step back, if Lu Shi didn't have a penchant for mirrors, I would be willing to marry the most useful official in her camp. In the future, I can also win over my husband and help second brother. The Xichang empress could not make up her mind and could only tell her daughter's words to her husband. When the emperor heard this, he felt that his daughter's words were very reasonable. It was not enough for him to send his son over to be a concubine. After all, his position would not be stable without an heir. If an important official married the empress concubine and became his son-in-law, he would be able to win over an important ally. Before he gave birth to an heir, his son would be able to straighten his back. In addition, this pair of children was a rare pair of dragon and phoenix twins. They were the auspicious sign of a dragon and phoenix, and their importance was even greater. To outsiders, it was absurd for the emperor of Xichang to send his children out in exchange for a rich country's army. They did not know that this opportunity had been snatched by this pair of siblings. The emperor of Xichang did not tolerate women. Not all of the concubines in the palace were from gentry families. 80% of them were chosen from the common people. Thus, there were many children born of ordinary concubines. They all stared at this opportunity. She did not know what the genes of the royal family were. Regardless of gender, they were all very good-looking. In order to exchange for money and provisions, the emperor of Xichang had sent out a few of the younger empress concubines. As the only daughter of the first wife, she was of noble birth and had a pure bloodline. She could not be reduced to such an unbearable state. Her thoughts flipped and the scenes of the past flashed through her mind. The empress concubine took a deep breath and slightly opened her arms. She raised her chin slightly. A few maids came forward to undress her and help her bathe. This scene made her think of the days when she lived a life of luxury. No matter what, this trip must be successful. A similar situation happened to the prince, but his expression was even more indifferent. Occasionally, a hint of humiliation flashed through his eyes. The two of them needed more than 2 hours to bathe and change. Jiang Pengji's battle bath only took 2 to 3 minutes. She changed her clothes early and opened the main streaming room. She ate melon seeds and let the maids comb her hair. She listened to the maids and attendants report on the reactions of the two heavenly favored ones. After Jiang Pengji heard this, her expression was indescribable. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.